Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast brought to you by Tacticam. Tacticam is by far the easiest way to begin filming your hunts. Whether it's the 4K 5.0 or the budget-friendly solo, Tacticam has something for everyone. Check them out at tacticam.com. This year we're also working with Spartan Forge. Spartan Forge is machine learning for the deer woods. Basically, Spartan Forge takes collared deer studies, insurance car deer accident information, social media geolocations, and it couples that with weather, moon phase, and rut activity to tell you when or when not to be in the woods. This currently has an online interface at spartanforge.ai, but the app is currently being built and set to launch late summer. Once the app goes live, you can expect there to be a price increase, but if you use code BOWHUNTER, you can save 25%, and that will stick with you as long as you use the Spartan Forge services. So head on over to spartanforge.ai and get your free 14-day trial. I forgot to mention this on the last podcast intro, but we're still giving away that 2021 Bowtech Carbon Zion. So that's a brand new 60-pound Bowtech Carbon Zion with an HHA Tetra single pin sight and an HHA rest. So it's like $1,000 worth of bow, same bow that I'm going to be shooting this year. And we're giving away one for free. All you have to do is go to bowhunterchroniclespodcast.com. Up in the right-hand corner, fill out the information for the bow giveaway. You can go to our Instagram, the link tree in the bio, the top one, it says Bowtech Carbon Zion bow giveaway. Click that, enter in the information, and you're all set. While you're there, you can also click on the link for the Patreon page. And Patreon is a crowdfunding for creators. So basically, that's a way of saying thank you for everything that we do, but it helps us tremendously. It helps us pay for hosting fees, website fees, Zoom fees, everything that it costs for logistically to keep this podcast going. And so what we do is we use some of that money to give back. Coupled with our sponsors, Tacticam is giving away a fisheye package. So the Tacticam fisheyes, they're designed for fishing. They're wide-angle cameras. They have a loop mode. They have the ability to take external power. They work with the remote. So if you had one of the 4K 5.0s, you could get the remote and you could use them in unison. One button turns both of them on. But they're giving away one of those packages. We've used them turkey hunting. They're going to be a great addition for any bow hunter, and Tacticam's giving away one of those packages. We've purchased one of Dan Infalt's beast stands, and we're on the list for that. So as soon as that gets to us, we're going to be giving that away. In addition to that, we're partnered with Basemap. Basemap gives away one of their 1-year paid subscription packages, and so that gets you all the maps, all the layers for the entire country. So for an already incredible price, Basemap has all these layers. They have, water, lake depths, river, streams, public lands, all the landowner information at a fraction of the price of some of the other ones. And if you use code Chronicles, that'll save you 20%. So it ends up being $2 a month if you were going to pay for it. It's impossible to beat. So they give away one of those along with a hat and shirt, swag pack. Spartan Forge, who we talked about in the intro, Spartan Forge is giving away a year subscription to their service as well. That's hard to beat. I mean, Spartan Forge is really awesome. I'm really looking forward to when the app comes out. The app looks amazing. It's just a matter of getting it into our hands. And Bill has actually offered up a Zoom meeting for all of our Patreon. So if you have an interest in talking with the owner of the company and having it explain more, get a hold of me. We're setting that up for our Patreons. It's just a matter of when the app goes live and getting to see all the functionality of that. Zinger Fletchings, they're also great guys. They make 3D printed custom compression fit fletchings. So for guys that don't have time, for guys on the run, for guys that are traveling and just want to throw a couple extra in their kit, these are a great option, and they're giving away a set of their new 3D printed fletchings. And so you can check that out at patreon.com/Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. It's in the same link tree when you're signing up for that bow giveaway. Click on Patreon and check it out. But we appreciate everybody that's listening. This podcast is a long one, but my goodness, there's so much good information in here. So interesting. Billy is so interesting. We're talking about how to trap a falcon. We talk about, primitive weaponry, why sometimes he uses a crossbow, recurve. He lives, he works, he does all of these things, and he still has time for, falconry, jujitsu, killing, hunting 300 days a year. Just an excellent podcast. But thank you guys so much for listening. I know you're going to enjoy this one. Enjoy the episode. Hey everybody, Adam and John back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And we are going to be calling our good friend Billy. He is one of the Hang and Hunt podcast guys. He's the other half of Hunt Urban, and he's one of the few guests that always requests us to just call him, no lead in, no anything. So here we go. Who knows what we're going to get? Hello?
How's it going?
It's going. It's going. We are recording, and I saved this just for you.
Oh, you didn't tell me you were doing that. I already opened mine.
Hey, let me reciprocate.
Oh, man. So I just told everybody that you are one of the hosts of the new Hang and Hunt podcast. You happen to be the other half or one of the guys from Hunt Urban. They can see you in outdoor life from here to there. You're generally, I want to talk a little bit about it seems like you're kind of a staple on the Primitive Pursuit podcast and the stuff that they're doing. But yeah, how are you doing, Billy? And kind of tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad to be back. I love talking to you guys. I was so bummed this year I didn't get to hang out with you guys at ATA. I'm really bummed that last year we didn't get to go bow fishing for skate. But besides that, that's coming up, by the way. Besides that, my name's Billy Phillips. Like Adam said, I'm part of the Hunt Urban crew. Taylor and I mainly. We've got a bunch of other buddies that we hunt with in the burbs around Washington, D.C. for deer. We're mainly, knocking the population down because we have up to 400 deer per square mile. A lot of people have heard that story. We have a podcast out called the Hang and Hunt podcast. We do a ton of saddle hunting. That's where the hang is. But then also, we just hang out and it's really unfiltered. We just sit there and BS most of the time. And sometimes we talk about a little bit of hunting.
Well, I was just going to say, that's one of the things that I forgot I was going to give in the lead in. I said that your likeness in other parts may be archived at Disney from security camera footage.
If that doesn't hit YouTube one day, I'll be blown away. It was a few years back, and for some of the listeners who didn't hear the story, I had a distressing issue at Disney World, a distressing bowel issue at Disney World, and it was a public experience. If you want to hear about that, it's in great detail. You may have to. I would probably keep your any squeamish people away from it, but that's in one of our episodes, and it was a doozy. And what's crazy is one of the the things that brought Taylor to the forefront of being a really funny guy is the time that he crapped his pants in a saddle, and on that episode we kind of somehow that came up, and then I just said, I did that at Disney World one time, and then it snowballed from there. But now you brought up the Primitive Pursuit podcast. Mike and Chris, just super dudes. They came down a couple years ago to Virginia, and they wanted to see what falconry was like. So they came down to a meet and in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and I took him out. And I actually wasn't even going to hunt that day because it was so windy. We had like 30, 40 mile an hour winds. We were on top of this mountain, and I'm hunting with a red-tailed hawk that they're known for soaring. I mean, you see them up a mile in the sky just soaring around. So when they get a little bit of wind, all they have to do is spread their wings and they're up, right? Well, a bird like that, I mean, if it goes a half a mile away or 3/4 of a mile away, I don't have GPS and telemetry on it. Some people do, I don't. But if it gets that far away, I'm going to have a hard time finding it again. So they came down and they're like, come on, let's go out and hunt. So, well, guess I got to do it. And it was sleeting and snowing and rainy. And we went out and toughed it out. And we had a couple chases here and there. And we weren't able to get anything that day. But Mike was so enthralled with it that he came down to the next meet in Blacksburg, Virginia. And we caught some game down there, and he got to witness it, firsthand. And he was totally hooked. Well, the president of the Virginia Falconers Association is a good buddy of mine. His name's Gene Stevens. And I introduced Gene to Mike. Well, they became friends. Gene became his sponsor. Now Mike is going into his second year of falconry, and he's wild and in it, man. He's a really cool guy. He obviously primitive pursuit. He's all into primitive hunting. He naps his own arrowheads. He makes his own bows and arrows. He does use longbows and recurves that are made, from a production standpoint, but he does like to make his own stuff. He does a lot of trapping. He's one of those guys that, if you were in a situation where apocalypse happens, where, nowadays we're kind of wondering if this crap's going to happen, right? He's the type of guy you're like, oh, I'm so glad I know Mike, right? He's going to be the guy where everyone's going to run to Walking Dead time and say, hey, we all think we're cool and we think we're bad and tough, but he literally will go out and say, I'm going to live off the land for a month during my vacation. He's that type of guy. Really, really cool dude. But yeah, he got me into, he kind of pushed me back into getting into some flintlock and more primitive gun hunting. And I was able to go down, and I ended up buying a flintlock squirrel rifle and took it down to Florida this year for a turkey hunt, which was awesome.
Yeah, I want to get into that a little bit because, I don't know if John's up on that story, but that's kind of like right up his alley. I feel like, not that it's a flintlock, but it's just like this ridiculous custom old ass gun. But I wanted to touch on it. That was something in all of our speakings last time. We didn't get into the falconry thing. So how did you get into that, or how does somebody even approach that topic other than the way that you outlined?
Like, I'm going to go get a bird and go hunt with it.
Yeah, I mean, and some people, if you just saw a hawk out in the wild and you knew nothing about falconry, you wouldn't think to go and hunt with this bird, right? But I read a book called My Side of the Mountain by Gene Craighead George. And I think the book was written back in the early 50s, if I'm not mistaken. And a brief synopsis: a boy runs away from a large family. He runs away from home and goes to the Catskill Mountains in New York and finds a peregrine falcon nest and takes a bird out of the nest and trains it to hunt with him. And he lives off the land in a tree. And it was a boyhood dream of mine to be able to live in wilderness on my own, live off the land, trap and hunt my food, gather and things like that. And he did it also and supplemented his meals with what the falcon caught. And I was blown away. I ended up calling the Maryland DNR. I was, 13 years old. And I said, I'd like to purchase a peregrine falcon. And the lady just laughed and said, whoa, hold on, time out. You can't just purchase a peregrine falcon. Little did I know at that point, they were an endangered species. DDT had come back and just wiped out like a lot of raptors. And she's like, all right, first, time out, slow down. First of all, you have to have permits. you have to. At least I called them and didn't just go try to like take one, right? But she said, you have to have a permit. And she said, by the way, you have to at least be 14. I said, well, I'm 15. And I was like 11 or 12. I don't even know. So she sent me this package that was like a half an inch thick. And there was so much, there was so much in it detail wise, just the laws and protections that were behind it. And I found out that, it's really a very time consuming thing. You really have to dedicate a space in your home, a space on your property, a couple hours every single day. You have to focus and you have to make sure that this bird is a part of your life. It's not a pet. It's not even remotely close to a pet where you can just say, well, I'm going on vacation. Can someone else come look at this thing? So I realized then when I was a kid that it wasn't going to be right to do this at that point. I was wrestling competitively from a very young age all the way through college, and that I was doing it year round. I knew I couldn't do it then. And then when I graduated, met my wife, we got settled, I finally got to a place where I had enough room to do it and I could make some time. I went full bore and I went and did it. So how do you get into it?
Well, real quick, like when you said that, like, did you tell your wife like ahead of time, like, as soon as we get settled, I'm going to get a raptor?
My wife and I are really, really close. So from the very beginning, she knew that was something that was on my mind. Just like hunting was, just like fishing. There wasn't a separation between, I really love to hunt. I love to be in the outdoors. I love to fish. I want to do falconry one day. These are goals of my life. There was no separation in that. And in my life, I've tried to be realistic on if I can do a certain thing, I'm going to do it. If I can, for example, when I moved to Atlanta right after college, and I didn't have a place to deer hunt at all. So, I didn't really think about knocking on doors very much. And I worked at a Bass Pro Shop down there, met a couple guys that worked there who I'm still friends with to this day. And that's 20 some years ago. And, they were able to take me out on certain properties. I went to public lands, but it was Orange Army. And I didn't have much success. So I said, I'm going to pass on hunting right now. And I did a lot of fly fishing down there because it was 2 miles from the Chattahoochee River. So I was able to kind of, I guess, adapt to that situation. I knew I couldn't hunt very much, so I fished a lot. As soon as I moved back to Virginia, I found that there was this stupid overpopulation of deer. So, I've probably fly fished 10 times in 15 years because of that, because that's all I do is deer hunt. And then, again, evolving from that, once I was able to, I moved out of a townhouse and into a single family home and got a little bit more room. And I was able to then say, hey, now it's time to get into falconry. So my wife's always known that those things were on my mind. Excuse me. But we have a pretty good open communication about things. So it wasn't a big surprise to her that I was like, hey, by the way, tomorrow I'm going to go trap a bird,
Yeah. So then that process, what is the process once you're all in?
It is a tedious process, and I think they do it purposely. They don't want someone to just fly by night, come in and say, hey, I want to do falconry, try it out, and then they're halfway through a season, they've got a bird that's under their care. They don't want to just let it go in the middle of winter when it may die, because so raptors, especially, I'll just make red-tailed hawks as an example because it's the typical beginner falconry bird. And I say beginner bird because it's one that is most readily available, not necessarily because it's like a entry level. It's a very capable hawk. So let's take red-tailed hawk, for example. If you became an apprentice falconer, you passed tests, the state came out to your home, they did an inspection on your facility, they inspected your equipment, obviously they give you a test, you have to pass a test that's, put it this way, if you never studied for it and you didn't know anything about falconry, there's no way in the world you would ever be able to pass this thing. You have to actually know. So you also have a sponsor who's committed to being with you and helping you through the process for 2 years. So you have to set all this stuff up. You have to build a facility. You have to make the equipment before you can ever even get a permit, right? So you have to absolutely be serious about this. Once you actually get permitted and you are an apprentice falconer, you don't even have a bird yet. You have to go out and trap one. So there are many different ways to trap one, and there's a lot online. I don't really like to get into super details about how it's done because I really don't want anyone to just go out there and just trap one and, possibly injure it. But there are traps out there that you can make. One's called a balchatri. Basically, it's a small cage. You put a gerbil or a mouse or something like that in, and then it's a wire cage like a hardware cloth, and you put monofilament nooses or wire nooses all over this thing, right? And when you see the hawk that you want to trap, you get close enough to it, preferably in a vehicle or something like that. You drive by and you throw this thing out the window. You like frisbee it. So this gerbil is like frisbeeing through the air, landing softly, obviously, in the grass or whatever right next to the road. And you have to do it in a way that the hawk doesn't see it. So you want to do it on the opposite side of the vehicle from the hawk. There's a little stalking to it, even though you're in a vehicle. And so then you drive up a couple 100 yards and park, hopefully safely in a back road or something, and get the binos out and watch. And the hawk, once it sees that gerbil in the trap, will come down and try to eat the gerbil. And it'll get caught in the monofilament nooses, and you haul ass back down there. And then you've got a hawk that is not happy, right? Because it has never been close to humans like this before. It's got talons that will go through, it'll go through 2 layers of elk hide and a glove. I mean, you need to wear welder's gloves. And then even if you do that, if it gets you in a certain way, or especially the really big hen red tails, if they get you in a certain way, I mean, they can possibly break a finger. I mean, they're powerful. And this thing is like ready to fight. So you have to then know exactly what to do to untangle it safely without injuring it, not getting hurt yourself, not breaking any feathers. You have to be able to put a hood on it so it calms down, secure it, make sure you give a full health inspection, see if it's the hawk that you want. And if it's the hawk that you want, then you start putting equipment on it and you begin training right away. If it's not the hawk that you want, you let it go and you start all over again.
What's the criteria of a hawk that you want, or a good hawk versus a bad hawk?
Well, typically a lot of people would like to have a larger hawk because they're able to take squirrels a little bit easier. They have bigger feet. You want really big feet, really big, strong, thick, heavy feet, big talons. That's important for squirrels. Now, if you're in an area that has tons of rabbits, well, then you would never hunt squirrels. Squirrels are really dangerous. They're tree ninjas. I mean, you've seen them. They can bite through hickory nuts and things like that. So imagine what they can do to a toe of a bird. It's really exciting to hunt squirrels, but it's also dangerous for the hawks. So I prefer to hunt rabbits, but I don't know about you guys up in Michigan, but in Virginia and on the East Coast, rabbit populations have gone down significantly. And even out west, there's a disease that's wiping out rabbit populations. So I'm worried for the future for rabbit hunting in general. But so I like to get a big hawk that has big feet. Now, I'll preface this with, if you've been driving, my very first year, I drove 1,800 miles before I caught a hawk. I drove roads for 1,800 miles. I mean, it was like after work, in the mornings before work, on the weekends, all weekend long, I was just driving and driving and driving and driving. Finally, 1,800 miles later, I was able to catch a hawk. So, and that was my first year, so I didn't really know what I was doing. But also, I was going to take the first one. And that very first one was tiny. It was like a 29, I think it flew at 29 or 28 ounces. And the one that I flew this past year flew at over 40 ounces. And Mike's bird, I think his bird flew this year at like 50 ounces. So there's a big swing on the size of bird. So, a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. So to answer your question, but if you had to pick and choose, you'd pick a bigger one.
So all this 1,800 miles, you're riding side saddle with the fucking gerbil wrapped up in monofilament? Like, did you get pulled over in that time frame and you had to say
Well, funny you say that, yeah, because that actually has happened. You're on the highway, right? And there's definitely a gray area there. I mean, it's common that falconers do hunt from roads and things like that, but you're not going down the interstate and throwing a trap out, while people are whizzing by at 70 some miles an hour, right? But,
in the DC area.
Yeah, especially around DC, right? So I did have it happen once where it was on a road that it was 45 miles an hour, but it wasn't very busy. And I trapped a hawk for another falconer. He was desperately trying to find a bird. So we trapped this bird, and we saw the bird hit the trap, and he gets caught. So we haul ass back there, and a car pulls up next to it. And I said, "Hey, we're federally licensed falconers. This is our trap. We haven't." And they're like, "Oh, we just wanted to make sure. We saw it was in distress." And, I said, "Okay, no problem." They ended up calling the police. So, and we're being really quick about it, but there must have been a cop close by, because the cop rolls up. And he's like, "What are you guys doing? Those are protected." I said, "Hey, we're federally licensed." He said, "Prove it." And we pulled out our falconry licenses, and he looked through and he's like, "Are you sure you're allowed to do this?" I'm like, "Look, man," I'm like, "Oh gosh, this is going down the wrong road." But then we started talking about, the process, and I said, and he was actually cool. He was more interested than anything else, but I definitely, I was a little worried there. One of the safer way to trap hawks is from an actual trap site. This is another cool way that it's done. It's very, very difficult to find a good trap site. Needle in a haystack. It's more important than finding the kill tree on your property. It's so difficult to find a place. So typically you need to have a migration route, and then you need to find a pinch point on a migration route for birds. So imagine how difficult that is on a grand scheme of birds going thousands of miles. Okay, find their pinch point. There's only a few, right? So, and then you need to get permission on the property that's on the ground under that aerial pinch point. So, so a lot of times on ridges, they'll come down ridges, and we have actually a couple ridge sites where you set up a blind, your regular deer hunting blind, and you have this apparatus outside. I don't even want to get into how complicated it is, but there's poles, ropes, strings, pigeons, and nets and bow nets out there. It takes an hour and a half to set up. It is a pain in the ass. You get out there super early, and you're in a blind for 12 hours. You get out there, and you've got a pigeon on a string, and you're flapping it, and these hawks and falcons come down and try to kill your pigeon because they think it's in distress. And as it comes in, you pull your pigeon closer to your trap, and then as that raptor comes into the pigeon, you spring your trap and catch it in a bow net. It's exciting as hell and crazy. It's super crazy, but that's a hell of a lot of fun and a cool way to do it. I'm going to try to get some video of it this upcoming fall, because it's a blast.
Sounds like something that Wile E. Coyote would set up, like Acme.
I've got my Acme nets. Yeah, it does work though. We'll catch anywhere from 3 or 4 to a couple dozen raptors in a day.
And so, what's the process of training this thing to come back to you? So you've just said, "Aha, I've got you," and this thing is not. These are predators.
Wild.
These are predators. So
very wild.
So
very wild.
How do they come, or where does this codependence lie, or how does that? I have to imagine it's a relationship build.
Very much. You hit it on the head. There is a codependence in a relationship, and it's built on trust. There is no way that you can make a bird like that, submissive, some people back in the day would turn a dog like a puppy on its back, and when it stopped wiggling, then the dog will be more submissive. You can't do that with one of these animals. So you have to actually have that thing on your fist and get it to trust you enough that it'll stay there without trying to fly off. That's the first step. The second step is to try to get it to eat from your fist, to actually try to get it to, you can actually feed it, you can give it food, and it will eat it and swallow it. Once it does that, then you build from there. Once it understands, okay, this thing's not trying to kill me, because you can, the very first time you have a hawk on your fist and it's standing there, you can take a piece of meat and put it in its open beak, because their mouth is wide open, their wings are wide apart. You can put a piece of meat in its mouth and it will just keep its mouth open and not move. But if you stick your finger in there, it'll bite you, right? But it will not eat that meat, no matter how delicious it is, no matter how hungry it is. It just doesn't trust you, and it's frightened. So you dim lights, you calm it down, and you have it on your fist, and you spend hours, literally hours, getting that bird to understand that you're not going to kill it. You don't look in the eyes. You don't try to intimidate it. You're basically a tree branch. I mean, you're a moving tree branch, but it figures out you're not going to hurt it. And then it figures out that, oh, you've got food and I can eat it. And it eats, and you're a perch. And then from there, you build to the point where you get it to, you put food on your fist and have it actually bend down and take its eyes off of you to eat. And then once it actually takes its eyes off of you and it's eating, and you're within a foot or two of it, you've built trust right there. You still have to build more, but you've built enough trust that it knows you're not going to just bite its head off when it turns the other way. And then you progressively, tiny baby step by baby step, get it to step up to your fist for food, and then you get it to hop, then you get it to fly a foot or two, then you get it to fly 5 feet. Then you take it outside and you put it on a string, a creance, that it can't fly away, but you put it on a perch, and it's attached to this line, and it flies to you for food over a period of 2 or 3 weeks. And then once it's flying a certain distance to you for food, and it trusts you, and it comes to you, and it's pretty much automatic. Well, you cut the leashes, and you cut everything, and you let it fly on its own. Very similar to the way you've been training it, and have it fly to you without any connection whatsoever. Once you do that, you do the same exact thing, but you put game under it. And if you can flush a rabbit under it while it's thinking, oh, I'm just going to fly to this stupid human for food. Well, there's a rabbit, and it hits a rabbit and kills a rabbit. Then it knows, okay, I can hunt with this person too. Then you start kicking up game for it, and it realizes, okay, this guy doesn't kill me. He's a perch for me. He feeds me, and he kicks up game for me. I'll hang around him, and I'll follow him all around any field that he goes to, because it's food and shelter and protection. The bird they're not a very smart animal, but they're smart enough to realize that this is a positive relationship for them, and they'll just follow you everywhere.
So you take it one step further, though. Don't you hunt with the dog too, with the bird?
Yeah, that can be a challenge, because you have to get the bird then to trust that the dog's not going to kill it, or that the dog's not going to take the game that it killed.
What about
taking the dog?
Yeah,
I've got this Jack Russell Terrier. His name's Fisher, and he is the biggest pain in the ass in the world. He is so awesome, but he's the biggest pain in the ass. He's killed, I can't tell you how many chickens, my wife's chickens. He's gotten out and he kind of maybe maimed a neighbor's duck. I think I may have to go to court for him, because he's gotten out a couple times. Like he's a maniac, but everything's secure now. Like he can't get out, right? But it's like you let him outside, and if you're not hunting with him, because he's trained to hunt, right? If you're not hunting with him right then and there, he's going to go and hunt himself. So it's really funny though, Fisher. He was a puppy, and I took him out with a hawk, and he found a rabbit, and he saw it before the hawk did. and he went after the rabbit. The hawk came down out of the tree and put her talons right in the back of his head, and kind of like leapfrogged off of him, kept flying, and killed the rabbit. Ever since then, and he yipped and yelped, was like, ever since then, he won't get close. He won't get close enough to get hurt, right? I've actually, there was one time where I had mistakenly, I fed the hawk and I left the gate open. And I was coming in and out, putting water and, and cleaning and things like that. But I try not to ever keep the gate open while I can't see what's going on there, and I inadvertently left it open. Well, Fisher goes in there and sits next to the hawk, and the hawk's sitting there. I mean, they're sitting side by side within 2 feet of each other, just chilling. And I mean, if it was a chicken, he would have killed it and eaten it. But he knows that there's a danger level there, and he knows not to cross that line. In fact, there was a week. The hawk killed her. One of the rabbits she killed this year. I took a picture of it, and I made Fisher. I forced him to sit next to her on a log, and I got him a little closer than he wanted to be. And there's like a series of pictures. And the best picture I posted like on Instagram or whatever. But there's a bunch of pictures where he's like, ears are back, and he's looking at that hawk like, oh, please, I know I'm close to you. Please don't hit me. Please don't hit me. But it was funny. After he got hit, it took about 5 seconds for him to go, okay, let's go chase another rabbit. I mean, he's a terrier. They're just savages. That's a whole new level of falconry, though, when you get into like bird dogs and stuff like that. So
when you obviously you catch this bird, what is like the timeline like, and how long do you keep it or train it, and have you had it to the point where like, well, this bird just isn't going to work out?
Yeah. Yes to all. So typically you want to trap a bird. You want it to be eating from your hand within a couple days. You want it to be hopping to your fist within 5 days to a week. You want it to be flying to you within, let's say, 8 to 10 days. You want to be outside flying on a creance within 2 weeks. You want to be hunting, I would say, no longer than 5 to 6 weeks. You should probably be hunting. Now, there are so many different factors that come into this, and there are different personalities of birds. There are so many different things that can go into that. But I'd say on average, from the time you trap, 5 or 6 weeks, you're probably hunting or close to it. The bird gets better and better, and you get better and better with that bird throughout the season. Some people will keep their bird, and they call it intermewing, and they'll intermew a bird and let it go through the molt, and they'll keep it in captivity throughout the spring and summer, and then into the fall, they'll start hunting it again. And that's an advantage because you're basically, a week or so, and you're back into hunting. As long as the bird is fit and in shape and ready to hunt, you're ready to hunt really, really soon. So you don't have to go through that 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 week training process. But you did go through a whole summer where you're not allowed to hunt. There's no game that you can hunt, and plus they're going through the molt. So typically what I'll do, what I really like to do, what gets me is training a bird for that fall into the winter, hunting it for a couple months. And then once it gets nice outside and there's a lot of game for it to catch, I release the bird and it can go out and then hopefully it can get into the breeding population later on. And it gives it a leg up really on a lot of the other raptors, because in the first year, a red-tailed hawk, for example, since I've been talking about them, they have up to a 80% mortality rate in their first year. So if I trap one, odds are 80% chance it would have died anyway and probably starved or gotten killed by another raptor or hit by a car or whatever. 80% chance it would have died. So in the spring when I release them, they've had vet care. They've had, meals constantly. They're in perfect feather, perfect condition. They're in shape. They're ready to go. And, they've got a leg up on all these other hawks that have had a difficult winter. When my hawk has had, a stellar winter and killed tons of game and been fed and had a, when it got really nasty and really super cold, I'd bring it inside so it didn't get too cold, so they get pampered. But so that's kind of the timeline. That a lot of brand new falconers will have difficulty, and it might take them 2 months to get a bird flying and hunting, and that's it does happen. I mean, it's pretty common because there are so many different factors to it. But when it really comes down to it, when you start to do it a lot, you just trust the process, even when you're frustrated and it ends up happening. I mean, it's like shooting a bow. And I know, Adam, you're getting into traditional. I know you're trying to kill turkey with one this year. That's a process, man. I mean, and you have to trust the process. It's like, you wish you had Tom Clum sitting there as your apprentice all the time when you're trying to shoot that recurve. And that's kind of what you have when you're in falconry. You literally have a sponsor who's over your shoulder, kind of guiding you along and helping you along. And that's it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do it. It'd be too difficult to do, and you'd kill animals, and you'd just be unsuccessful, and it wouldn't be worth it if you didn't have a sponsor.
That was like the ultimate answer for that question, because I was like, man, so how long do you actually keep one? Do you catch one and keep it till it dies? I mean,
some people do, John. Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in captivity, a red tail will live 20 plus years in captivity, and you can hunt one absolutely for that long.
Okay.
And there's no law against that whatsoever. Now, on the other side of that is, as a falconer, as I'm a general falconer now, next year I have the opportunity to become a master falconer, which that'd be a name totally, and not in description without a doubt, right? But I can actually go out and buy raptors, so I can buy an imprint or a captive raised falcon or hawk. I can buy them now. And that's a whole different ball of wax. Once you buy a captive bird, you can never release it, so that you do keep that bird for its entire life, or you sell it or give it away or trade it or whatever. Depending on the laws, there's a bunch of different laws. You have to be really careful with what you're doing there. But yeah, if you have a bird that's captive bred, it's never able to be released, ever. Now, it can be lost. They do get lost sometimes because they're a bird and they can fly from hundreds of miles if they want to. But yeah, you can absolutely you can release a bird that you caught in the wild. But if you take a bird out of a nest and it imprints on you, for example, then that bird is not a natural wild bird. That bird can never be re-released into the wild also.
If I were in your position, I would 100% do that, and then I'd call up the Virginia DNR, and I'd be like, ring, ring, ring. Like, yeah, this is Billy Phillips. Remember me? I called 35 years ago. I would like to buy that peregrine falcon now.
That's really funny because now you can do it. I mean, this is that's a really recent thing that's been allowed. I mean, my sponsor, he's now passed away. He was a great dude. He was one of the pioneers of falconry in America, and he actually helped out. He got his PhD at Cornell and participated in breeding of falcons and hawks at Cornell. And it's one of the things that he said is back then, before the Lacey Act was involved, there was no, and before these laws and protection laws were in place, there were no laws. You could just, you could shoot a raptor if you wanted to. You could trap one. You could train one. You could keep one. There were no laws for or against it. And when he really got big into falconry, he flew peregrines on sage grouse in Wyoming. And back then, when they were endangered, you couldn't get one. So you had to buy imprint birds. And when you were able to finally get a permit to trap one, and when I say a permit to trap one, there's like I think in Virginia, there's maybe 2 or 3 permits per year to trap a peregrine falcon. And if, let's say, 30 people apply and 30 people get permission to do it, once those 2 or 3 permits are filled, everyone else just takes their permits and tears them up into tag soup. So he was fortunate enough to be able to trap a peregrine, and it took him 8 days on, I think it was on the eastern shore of Virginia. I can't remember if it was Virginia or Maryland, but 8 days in a blind with pigeons in the same kind of ridge trapping scenario I was telling you about. And he did not see a peregrine for the entire time, except the last hour of the last day. I mean, it's that you hear that all the time. And you guys, I'm sure you've been there on the last hour of the last day. One female peregrine came in and he was able to trap it. And he had that bird for a couple of years and hunted it in Wyoming. But it was having a peregrine is really, really special. Not only because it's the fastest animal on earth and it's the quintessential falconry hawk, but it's also special because they've been endangered and protected for so long, and now we're finally able to actually fly. Pretty cool.
Now, I have a question just about birds in general, and like it would have to. I mean, I would think it would like make you mad or piss you off, or maybe it's just a regular deal. But why is it that there's always these little like cowbirds and shit chasing around the what I would consider hawks or whatever?
Dude, I have no idea. I have no clue. I mean, I think part of it, just my idea from seeing these hawks fly around and stuff, is because those little birds can get away from these hawks. Now, you will never see one of those little Tweety birds chasing a goshawk, a sharp-shinned hawk, or a Cooper's hawk, because they will absolutely turn around and fly it down and catch it and eat. They'll do that to crows. They'll do it to red tails and hawks and eagles, and because they're slower, they're not as agile as a little tiny Tweety bird. They're just ripping fast, super, super quick. Well, those other hawks that I mentioned, goshawk, Cooper's hawks, and sharp-shinned hawks, they are like the Lamborghini, the Ferrari, and the Porsche twin turbo of hawks. I mean, they are like a zillion miles an hour right now, and they catch birds. That's what they do. Goshawks will catch hares and snowshoe hares and rabbits and things like that too. But they can also, a goshawk can catch quail off the fist. Like, you're holding it on the fist. Any of those 3 birds, you're holding it on the fist and quail flush up. You know how fast they are. And they're so fast that they can actually overtake the quail in the air within 20 or 30 or 40 yards.
Oh,
they're just, it's like a rocket ship coming off your arm. You're not fast enough mentally. When the quail flush, the bird's already gone, and then you realize the quail flush, and the bird's already chasing them. That's how fast they are. It's hardwired in their brains it's like an explosion. It's instantaneous, and they're just super fast twitch, and they're maniacs. I've never flown either one of those. They're called accipiters. They're actually called the true hawks in the raptor world. And I've never flown one, but I did. I hunted with a buddy of mine, and he's got a freaking awesome Instagram page, and it's called NJ_falconry. I'm pretty sure his name's Casey Everett, and he flies a Siberian goshawk cross. It's all white, and she is just this white death monster. He's taken geese. It hit a couple turkeys this year. He's taken dozens and dozens of ducks, rabbits, squirrels. This bird is a monster. And I watched it this year. This is no BS. I watched it this year in Maryland at the Maryland Falconry meet, in the Potomac Falconers Association meet. Rabbits are smart. You wouldn't think they are, but they're smart. If they're getting pursued in the air, they will run into the wind because they know it's difficult for an avian predator to fight into the wind to be able to catch it. So I saw this, and I'm watching this. This rabbit busted out of the brush, and the hawk wasn't ready for it, and turned and looked and saw it. And this rabbit was already halfway to this pile of like telephone poles, and that goshawk just took off after it into the wind and powered through into the wind and caught it still 10 feet away from this pile of telephone poles. It was the most amazing, like, it was amazing just to see that type of athleticism and power and speed and something like that, and aggressiveness. Just ferocious, man. If you wanted to name like a badass broadhead or something, or a bow, or some type of badass arrow, something like that, if you wanted to name it the baddest ass thing, name it a goshawk, because that's the baddest mother jumper in the world.
Now, with you're talking about these different kind of hawks and falcons, and you're talking about these hawks as like the Lamborghinis, the Ferraris, and all of this stuff, and you're driving around trying to catch, say your first hawk, and or whatever. Like, are you able to identify like which type of bird it is before you throw the gerbil to the wind, so to speak?
Oh yeah, now I am. I mean, but now I am. Yes, when I first became an apprentice falconer, I could tell a red-tailed hawk from, let's say, a different, like I could maybe a red-shouldered hawk, like but I wasn't very good at it. Now that I've been trapping for years now, like 4 years now, and I've trapped a bunch of different hawks, and I've seen them up close and handled them. Now I can tell. And if I see a bird flying, I instantly can see and tell what type of bird that is, usually.
Well, I just asked because of like, I think of like, on some level, like when you're fishing, you're targeting a certain species, but you could accidentally catch, whatever that's not in season or whatever, and you have to let it go, etc. So does that happen where you catch the wrong hawk or, an owl,
Sure.
or, whatever?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I'm going to send you the picture. My buddy's got it's a private Instagram account, and because he's in government service, so he doesn't post things, but I'll make sure that he allows me to share this picture, and I'll send it to you. He was fishing on his pond, and he trapped one, right? But he's fishing on his pond using some type of a topwater bait, and a barred owl came down and hit his bait in the water and got snagged on the treble hook, and he called me. This was just tonight. Called me and was like, "What the heck should I do?" But I was on the mower and stuff like that. So when I got back to him, he said I threw a sheet over it, was able to get it unhooked and everything, and it was no worse for the wear. But so do things like that happen? Yes, absolutely. When you're road trapping, typically you will put binoculars on a bird and see, okay, that's a red-tailed hawk. I want a red tail. But then you look and see, is it a mature bird or is it a juvenile bird? Because it's illegal to capture and take a mature bird, because you're taking one out of the breeding population, basically. But so you have to identify if it's not only just a red tail, but is it mature or is it a juvenile? And there have been times where I've seen a juvenile. I say, okay, I want to go trap that bird. I throw a trap out, and a mature bird comes down instead, or a different type of hawk that I'm not targeting comes down instead. And when you trap them, it's the same process. You still give them a full check. You make sure they're not injured. You make sure they're in good health and things like that, and then you release them. And if they are in poor health, then you can always, we have vets that we work with and wildlife rehab folks. So if there's one that's damaged or hurt in any way, or emaciated and stuff, we can usually take them and help them out too. But sometimes up on the ridge when we're trapping, well, actually all the time on the ridge when we're trapping, I'm focused on getting a red tail, but we've had golden eagles come in. And when a golden eagle comes in, look, I don't want to mess with that thing. I don't.
They will whoop your ass.
Gee, I mean, a golden eagle's talons. Look at your hand. Now, you can't say John's, because John's fingers are probably 7 inches long. But, on a normal human being's fingers, They're about 3 or 4 inches long, and that's how long a golden eagle's talons are. They're 3 or 4 inches long. I mean, if that sucker got you in the neck somewhere, it could really do some major damage. And the power in their feet are enough that they can literally break bones. If they grabbed you by the hand, I don't care if you have triple thick welding gloves on. If they want to squeeze and they get you in a certain way, they can break bones in your hands. They're that powerful. So, yeah, we've had golden eagles come in, and when they come in, we jump out of the blind and we just shoo them off and scare them and you yell at them and get them to fly away because we don't want to catch them. If I had a permit for them, I might, that'd be a different story. But when they come in, they're more of a pain in the butt than anything else. We had a couple peregrine falcons swooping in the very last time that I ridge trapped, and I did not want to catch them. I didn't have a permit for them. I didn't want to catch them, so we went out and scared them off. But sometimes it just happens. The Cooper's hawks come in all the time, and they're so fast that they're on your pigeon before you can even get it to your net. So you're trying to get it to your net as fast as you can before it kills the pigeon. And then you spring the trap and get out there and make sure the Cooper's hawk is in good health, and then you release it. But yeah, that does happen.
So what is a golden eagle? Is that just an immature?
No.
Okay. It's not an immature bald eagle.
It's a separate species of eagle, completely separate.
The reason that I ask is we were up at our property in the UP a dozen years ago now, and there was a bald eagle and then 2 other really big birds flying around.
Uh-huh.
And that night I went out and hunted, and I was sitting up on my tree stand, and I heard this whoof, whoof, whoof. And then one of those birds that wasn't the bald eagle, and I thought it was a golden eagle, but I thought it was just an immature bald eagle because it didn't have white head or feathers or anything, but it was about 3 feet tall. I don't know. And it landed about 3 feet above me in the tree. And I was like, holy shit. I don't know what to do.
Don't look at it.
I was like, I don't know what to do, So
yeah, don't grab its feet. Let me just give you some advice.
Yeah.
Most likely I would guess that was probably an immature bald eagle.
Mm-hmm.
If just a random layman looked at the difference between an immature golden eagle or any golden eagle, but especially an immature golden and an immature bald eagle, they are very similar. They're very similar in size. They're similar in color. They have a different pattern when it comes to the white that they have on them. Bald eagles will be a lot more mottled, but it is difficult to tell a lot of times. But an eagle is an eagle. I mean, I don't care. I know bald eagles are fish eaters and they eat a lot of carrion, and so do golden eagles too. But a golden eagle is something. If it came to hunting, I would pick a golden eagle all day. There are people who hunt roe deer and in England, in Europe, and foxes. There's a guy in, I think it's Oklahoma or Texas. His name's Titus. He's kind of a weirdo, but you can find him on YouTube. He's a freak. Well, man, he's just a goofball. If you watch the videos and you'll say, "Oh yeah, I know what Billy's talking about. He's a weirdo." But he obviously can train his birds really well, so I don't take anything away from that. But he actually hunts coyotes and jackrabbits at night with golden eagles and an African crowned eagle. Yeah, crazy. He hauls ass through these wide open fields in Kansas and stuff like that, where he drives these military vehicles at as fast as he can, 60, 70 miles an hour, spotlights, and hunts down these jackrabbits. And he's hunting for coyotes, but if jackrabbits are there, he'll let his eagles out. So the eagles have a head start because they're already on this vehicle driving 50 to 60 miles an hour. Takes the hood off of the eagle's head, throws the eagle out, and the eagle flies down whatever animal it is, jackrabbits or coyotes. And they actually catch coyotes like that.
Wow.
It's great. I just know that it was a bit unnerving.
They're scary
as hell, man. Yeah, you don't want to mess with an eagle. They can hurt you really bad. Like you're going to be in the emergency room.
We were up. My wife and I were up kayaking up in like the northern lower peninsula here in Michigan, and it was up by Glen.
Hold on, time out, John. Time out. You said the northern lower peninsula.
Yes, the northern section of the lower peninsula.
Okay, all right, I got you.
So if I say up north, we're like usually we're up in the UP, but
I got you. Okay,
wasn't quite that far. It didn't cross the bridge, so. But no, so we're up by it's called our Sleepy Bear Dunes, or it's the west coast by Traverse City. Well, we're up there and we're kayaking in this little lake, and all of a sudden I looked up and here was this huge bird. I'm like, that's a freaking golden eagle, but they're not normally in Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, this thing was huge. Like, the wingspan looked like as wide as mine, like 7 feet almost.
Yeah.
And it came down, and I swear it was eyeballing my wife in her kayak. I'm like, holy shit, that thing wants you for dinner, Ann. And it flew up and then landed up in a tree, and like the whole top, it was a big old huge like white pine, and the whole top of this tree just shook like and then it took off, and it sounded like the freaking tree was coming down. But then I looked it up, and that they've had like several golden eagles in the past, and they're like confirmed by the DNR and everything else, where it's like kind of their route as they're migrating.
Oh, really?
That cut across that like tip of Michigan. So I'm like, in that exact area, like on that lake. So I was like,
So most likely you saw one, and it's really cool because it's really special when you see something like that. Let's say a golden eagle, in an area that they typically maybe they just barely migrate through, like you're right on the edge of it, right? Yep. Around me, it's very seldom to see fisher in the wild. You'll see them a little bit more in Pennsylvania and up north, but it's not typical to see them.
Right.
But then in other areas, people are like, oh yeah, we see fisher all the time. Well, where we elk hunt, they're like, oh, damn golden eagles, hate them. That we see them all the time. I'm like, oh, I've seen like 2 or 3 golden eagles in my life on the East Coast, and out there, elk hunting, I see them every year when I go out.
Yeah.
It's wild. And it's funny. I get more excited seeing a golden eagle or something cool where I live, or, where you're talking about where you never see them. You get so excited about it. Whoa, it's so cool. I saw that. But then you go somewhere like Utah when they're like a dime a dozen. You're like, there's another one. Who cares? It's wild. But seeing one up close like that, a bird that big and massive is impressive. And I bet your wife wasn't exactly comfortable seeing a bird that big fly down at her.
Yeah, it was like literally, it was like just right above us, and it was, I swear, like it was eyeballing her.
So what would prompt an eagle to like attack somebody? Because one of our Patreons, Stan, he's in Washington, and he lives, I believe, on a river. I think that's what he was saying today. But he was telling a story that he was out like right at dusk shooting his bow, and he went down and pulled an arrow out and got hit in the back by an eagle, and it like cut him and everything, and then he like tried to scare it off, and he ran, like was walking back, and all of a sudden he heard that same like whoosh, 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 and he turned around and the eagle was coming back, and he let it go like, hey, get out of here. like he was bleeding and everything. And so why would that happen?
I would, like, in the wild, like a wild eagle that is so incredibly rare to the point where I'd say I it would be difficult for me to say that it could happen. Now, having said that, but this does happen more than you want to believe. People will take eagles, especially young eagles, illegally and try to raise them. And they feed them and feed them and feed them. They become imprinted and things like that, where that eagle then sees humans as a food source. And then the eagle becomes a dangerous problem when it grows up. So they release it. And then once they release it into the wild, it goes around looking for humans because humans give them food. And if you don't give an eagle food, it gets pissed off at you and hits you. That absolutely happens. Absolutely. So I would imagine, if my best guess would be that someone either lost a bird or released a bird that was possibly imprinted on humans. That would be my best guess.
Yeah, because I mean, I've heard about it like a few different times from like owls, like so with like bow hunters that are like sitting in a tree, not moving. Like one of my buddies, his dad got knocked out of a tree by an owl because he wasn't wearing a safety harness, but he was just sitting there and he saw the owl, and the owl just must have picked him up, just moving slightly.
Right.
And then when he brought his eyes back, the owl was right there and it hit him in the head. And
lucky he didn't lose his eye.
Yeah, well, it clawed him and he ended up falling out of the tree and getting all messed up.
Well, it happened to my buddy up in the UP, Larry. Same thing. This is like years ago. He's like, we didn't even have tree stands. We just climb up in a tree. And he's like, I had this little, like, just a stocking cap on. And he's like, we're sitting there and I'm just turning my head slowly. And all of a sudden, something hits me in the back of the head. And, next thing you know, I mean, it's like trying to rip my head off. And he's like bleeding everywhere, had claw marks in me, and it was an owl. But.
So with owls, what I've heard, and I haven't done any research to prove this or not, but I've heard that owls' hearing is so good that they can hear you blink. So you think about that. When you're in the woods, your body is still. Right. You're trying to hunt, and you're blinking. You maybe do a little scratch on your beard, and you're making these little tiny itty bitty noises that are eerily similar to a mouse, for example. And owls, as wise as people say they are not very intelligent critters. They're like box of rocks dumb. So they're hardwired to, when they hear or they're stimulated in a certain way, to attack it. Right. They're just seeing maybe, and a lot of times they're just seeing like a tiny piece of you. Exactly. They're not looking at you as a huge being.
That happened same thing happened to my brother. This was years ago too. He was sitting rifle hunting, sitting at the bottom of a tree, and I remember him telling the story. He was like sitting there and his hands were cold, but he was just like moving his trigger finger just to keep it like warm so he could feel it, and that was the only thing he was moving, like just sitting there, and he was just flexing his trigger finger, and all of a sudden an owl come in. And but he seen it was coming right at, and he just screamed and threw his hands up, and then the owl, it flared and went to holy fuck, this is something huge. It's not just a little freaking rodent, but maybe he was flicking something else. I don't know. But
my old man got hit in the face by a hawk one time. He was wearing a head net and got hit in the face by a hawk. It happens. They're, like I said, they're not brilliant. But their eyesight and their hearing is hardwired to their brain to kill. It's like when the doctor hits you below your kneecap and you involuntarily kick your foot out, they involuntarily attack when their brain senses that there's prey there that they can kill.
Right, it's like a reflex to them.
It is very much like a reflex.
Yeah, there was another one. I think it was Frank telling me about. They were at a shoot at our club, and the kid was in the pro division. I don't know if it was Frank or not, but whoever it was, the kid was in the pro division. And he was shooting terrible. How are you even shooting? He's in the 5 ring and stuff, and he was shooting left-handed. And they got to talking, and he's like, he had a patch on his eye. He was hunting, and the owl come in and hit him, and he lost his dominant eye. So he had to, but he was a pro shooter, so he had to switch up and start shooting a left-handed bow, and getting adjusted to shooting. Well, obviously now that was his dominant eye since his other eye was gone. But I mean, pretty crazy story.
Yeah, that's insane. My daughter is right-handed and left eye dominant, so I just made the decision, all right, you need to shoot left-handed. So that's what she shoots now. But that's got to be difficult to be able to change. You've been doing something a certain way your whole life, and then all of a sudden you have to change that drastically.
And you're a pro, so that's even.
And you're a pro. That's that's your livelihood.
Yeah, it's like,
oh boy, can someone give me a handicap here?
Well, I used to be pretty good, but what happened? Well, I lost tonight. Oh, okay, yeah, you get.
All right, here's an extra 50 points. Here you go.
I'll take that excuse.
That's me playing golf.
Like, to kind of circle back on everything, Billy here is the other half of the hang and hunt. He's the other half of the hunt urban, or whatever the main faces. And I feel like he's like the most interesting man in the world. Like when we went into ATA, like, I think we said this before, but Taylor looks like this frat boy that just rolled off the golf course in a First Light hat. He
literally is.
Well, I mean, I'm
100. That's exactly what he is.
And then you've got Billy here in a cashmere trench coat with a scarf on and a sweater. And I'm like, who in the world is this guy? Like, well, what I was thinking is, I was like, why does Taylor need a handler? Like freaking, like, you want to talk to me? Talk to him, But I mean, it's just super interesting. And like, where I was going with like that primitive pursuit stuff, it's like one of the questions I had for you, and I don't think I've ever got to discuss it, is it seems like, your dad and your brothers and your family are really big into hunting, but they seem to be more like on the traditional side. And then, like the last time we talked, when you were, you were shooting the frickin' super mission crossbow, like one of these cross guns, down in Africa or whatever. And it's like, for your family, you should be shooting like a medieval, like, crossbow,
right?
Like, one that like cranks like.
No, this is really how I look at hunting. I'm a hunter, just like I'm a fisherman, just like I'm an outdoorsman, and I want to be involved in any way that I can. I'm, with falconry, the quintessential falconry would be peregrine falcon, a bird dog, Wyoming, sage grouse. That's American falconry at its finest. Having a peregrine falcon 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet in the air, your bird dog goes on point, you flush it, and the peregrine falcon comes down at 150 miles an hour and kills a sage grouse, right? That's the quintessential American falconry. I don't have the time and effort to be able to do that. So I have a red tail that I take out 3 to 5 days a week for squirrels and rabbits for an hour or so a day, because I don't live in Wyoming and I don't have time to train a bird dog. So that's the same thing as, when it gets into bow hunting. Primarily, I would say 98. All right, I'll even say 90% of the time, I have either a compound or my recurve in my hand when I'm hunting. I will take a crossbow out sometimes, especially if I'm in a place where I really need to knock some deer down, and it's kind of one of those deals where we're not hunting here, we're culling. A lot of times I'll take a crossbow, and I don't feel bad for it, because I'm trying to do more of a job than I am trying to fulfill look, there are different reasons why we hunt, right? We go out there and we hunt because we enjoy our time, the camaraderie, we enjoy the challenge, and we enjoy the way that we want to do it, whether it's with, a recurve or with a compound or whatever. And there are also situations that I'm in, that Taylor's in, that sometimes we have landowners that they have, a couple acre property, and they have 20 or 30 deer coming to their property every day, morning and evening. And you knock a couple out with your compound because, it's a target rich environment. and the deer are starting to get wary of you, and you get a lot of pressure, and you're like, all right, well, I need to be very selective and how I'm doing this, especially on super, super tight property. So I'll pull out a crossbow, especially on something like that, where it's more, I'm not doing it for the challenge. I'm not hunting in that situation for a challenge. I'm more helping a landowner reduce the herd, and I'm feeding hunters for the hungry.
Right.
Now, when I go out and hunt for myself, when I go out and hunt with my dad and my brothers and my buddies, a different story. I mean, I don't think I've ever taken a crossbow or even a gun, even like gun season, like open day of gun season. I go out with a bow. I think it all depends on the way, not the way, but the reason I'm going out and hunting. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, and that's a great way to explain it. And I wasn't really trying to bust your balls. I was just simply saying I was interested because, like I said, it seems like you were a collegiate wrestler, extremely competitive. It seems to be a great relationship with your family and your brothers, and it's like your brothers are always posting about recurves and stuff, and I can't imagine that they don't bust your balls pretty hard about
100%.
Whatever you're
100%.
doing. So,
but I'm realistic too. And I know my brother, especially my brother Josh, he is hardcore traditional. That's what he does. If he has to pick up a compound, he will grudgingly. I don't know if he'll ever shoot another deer with a gun ever again. And he might not ever shoot another deer with a compound. I don't know, but he does hunt on these culling properties that we do too, where sometimes it's actually required to hunt with a compound or a crossbow. Like in our permissions, you're only allowed to hunt with certain equipment.
Right.
So he'll do that. But in general, does he bust my balls? Absolutely. But he also, he wakes up in the morning and he goes downstairs and he makes his pot of coffee. And as it's going, he goes down in his basement and he shoots a couple arrows through his longbow. And then when he gets home from work, he shoots a couple arrows, goes and picks up the kids. They have dinner, whatever, they do the family stuff. Everybody goes to bed. Before he goes to bed, he shoots a couple arrows. There are other things that are going on in my life that I'm filling my time with. And he's filling his extra time with shooting his longbow. And I tell you what, it pays off because the boy can shoot, and he can shoot really, really well. And he puts that time in. I'm realistic in the fact that I don't have the time. No, let me rephrase, because everyone always has time. I'm not willing right now to make the time to focus completely on going trad or going to, let's say, an atlatl, like Mike from Primitive Pursuits. That dude has I think I want to say, and I can't quote me on this, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I think in another state, maybe in Missouri or some other place, he has actually taken game with a spear or an atlatl. Like, that takes dedication and practice, a lot more than just with a longbow or recurve, and a hell of a lot more than with a compound, and infinitely more than with a crossbow or a gun. So I think the big takeaway is, I think people need to be realistic on how much they're willing to put into the practice and effort that they want, that they are allowed to put in or can put in to a certain thing. If you don't have the time to shoot a couple times a week, then you probably shouldn't be picking up a compound bow. You guys would probably agree. You have to be able to shoot and know your equipment a few times a week. With a trad bow, you kind of have to shoot almost every day. With a crossbow, you kind of can probably do it once a month or even less sometimes, as long as you're probably less. With a gun, you sight that sucker in and make sure it's sighted in, and otherwise there is no time So it all depends on how much you're willing to practice and are able to practice, and be realistic with yourself.
100%. I mean, and I see that with the trad bow, like for sure. And I haven't shot it since I shot at the turkey, and but like our season is expired, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do my other stuff, and that's why I'm like, I can't really like dedicate for deer or whatever, because I just am. I'm not ready yet. But
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love shooting that bow. But like I said, back to that, like that whole thing, you just had like this ridiculous. I mean, it's kind of like along the same level. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna go back in time and shoot this recurve at some turkeys, and you said, you know what? I'm gonna have this ridiculous gun built from back in time to and you end up shooting a turkey with it, right?
Yeah, that was another boyhood dream that I had, along with falconry. So my grandfather and my father used to go to Pennsylvania on their primitive flintlock hunt, and I think it was usually an antlerless hunt, and they took me along with them a couple times, and I was a kid, and it was the coolest thing because it was that you go up and there's snow on the ground. I mean, you guys are used to this stuff, but down where I'm from, when you hunt in the snow, it's a special thing. Well, we'd go up to Pennsylvania, central PA, and there'd be these old cabins with no electricity, and you get your water from the spring and the creek, and wood burning stove, and you'd go out on these flintlock hunts where they put on these big drives, and you'd see hundreds of deer a day, and people are trying to shoot them with these flintlocks, and it was always a challenge, and it was fun. It was a good time. And my grandfather and my father kind of taught me how to use a flintlock, and I shot it a couple times, and I always just admired those guns, and I just had just a draw to them, and I always loved squirrel hunting since I was a little kid. I've loved squirrel hunting. It was my first game animal I ever took was a squirrel. And I always wanted a flintlock that was capable or appropriate for shooting squirrels with. And again, just like in falconry, I bided my time and waited and saved up a couple dollars here and there, and contacted a guy who makes custom flintlocks, and his name is Ed Winger. He's from Virginia, Bealton, Virginia. Virginia or VA Flintlocks is his company, and he makes period accurate custom guns, flintlocks, mostly flintlocks. I don't think he makes anything else, but Fowlers and Jaeger rifles, anything from the most extravagantly engraved and gilded Jaeger rifle that you could imagine to a typical trade gun he's made, and he just does incredibly impeccable work. And I contacted him, and he said, well, I'm really busy, and I'm a one-man shop, and I don't think I can do something until the fall. And this was like in a January time frame of last year. And I said, well, this is my budget. And he said, well, you might want to think about getting a kit gun and building it yourself for that budget. And I'm like, oh, damn. It kind of really hit me between the legs. And I said, well, how about if I bump it up, a couple dollars here and there? And we got to talking, and he's like, I can work with you here. I can do this. And I said, all right, well, I said, you can't start until this date. I said, what if I give you a deposit on that date? And he said, oh, yeah, that's fine. I said, sweet. That's an extra 6 months that I can save up a couple dollars, not drink a beer. And, that's $1 a day, right? So I ended up putting an order in, and he had an idea that he already had in mind. He said, I've got a curly maple stock and a barrel that I think would be perfect. Basically, I've just been waiting for someone to ask me for this type of rifle. And I said, let's do it. And it's a Lehigh Valley style rifle. It's actually based on an original piece He made everything on the entire gun except for the barrel and the lock mechanism and the flint, obviously. But everything else is done. All the brass work. He created the trigger guard out of a mold, and he made everything on the gun. And as he's building it, he's sending me these progress pictures from a block of wood and a barrel and a lock to he's just whittling it down and working down and carving it. And then he gets to the point where he starts carving the wood. And I'm like, wow, look at that. Look at the carving on it. I didn't think I paid for all this. I hope he's not like triple charging me right now, And then he gets to what I think's finished, and I'm like ecstatic, and I'm ready to like send him like a full payment. And he's like, well, I'm still working on this extra carving over here, and then I have to start engraving the metal work. And I'm like, holy shit, this guy's going crazy. He ended up making a beautiful, absolutely exquisitely beautiful piece for me. One that a lot of people have looked at and said, oh, you can't actually hunt with that. I'm like, bullshit, man. I bought this gun because I want to hunt with it. And he finished it just in time for me to take it on a turkey hunt. My father has shot I think he's shot all of the turkeys in the U.S. and he went down to Mexico. He hasn't shotted. Wow. He hasn't killed the ocellated turkey in Mexico, but like the Rio and the Golds and the Goulds and the Merriam and the Easterns, but he had never killed an Osceola. So we went hunting in Florida, and my brother Bobby went with me and his son Seth, and they were going for hogs. Dad and I were just going for turkeys, and we went down and we had an opportunity to hunt turkeys, and at that point or this past year, it was illegal on private land to hunt with that muzzleloader down there. So I was really pumped, and I talked to the guy who made the rifle and asked him if he'd be able to have it finished and ready before this hunt. He was like, oh yeah, absolutely. And he got it, set it up, and I took it out and took it to my house, and I was just enthralled. I'm like, man, should I really actually take this thing? And there were two things that were bothering me. One, I didn't want to mess it up and scratch it up and beat it up. And two, it's so pretty, would the turkey see it? I'm like wondering if this thing's going to shine in the sunlight, right? And I set up a load, and I shot it, and I shot again. And I noticed my groups at 30 yards were, about a half an inch group. So I shot again, and I'd say about a 3/4 of an inch group at 30 yards. I said, huh. And it was dead on balls. I didn't move the sights at all. There's only the front sight that you can really move anyway. But I'm sorry, the back sight you can move, but the front sight you can file down, I guess. But it was dead on balls right away. So I took it down and to Florida and had some pretty good luck. I shot an Osceola at 35 yards and with a 36 caliber flintlock, and it put it down. It ran 10 yards and piled up. It was awesome. It was so cool. It was so cool. All right. So I've got to tell you this story because for the folks that didn't hear me tell the story on the Hang and Hunt podcast, this is something I learned from the dude that we went turkey hunting with. His name's Sage Kemper. It was a really incredible technique that he used to bring these birds in. First, we were setting up. I was clearing shooting lanes with pruners, and these two gobblers are coming in to our decoy. And he saw them while I'm pruning. He's like, they're coming, don't move. And as soon as they got around, there were some palmettos there. He's like, all right, get down, you're free. So I crawled behind a tree, was able to load up. And while I'm loading, the flintlock is not exactly an expedient weapon to load, right? This is the worst scenario. These birds are like rushing in from 50 or 60 yards away, and I'm trying to pour powder down a barrel. And it's like all this movement, and I'm stuck behind a tree being fat. And they're right there at the decoy, and I can see them, and I've got to freeze. And they were they start moving off because there's no activity going on. They know that this is not natural, and they get away a little bit. They finally get loaded up, but they're now at 50 or 60 yards, and I wasn't comfortable with that shot. So this dude is crazier than shit. He takes a turkey fan, and crawls out of the brush, out of our like makeshift blind that we made out of natural blind. He crawls out of it and keeps the fan between him and the turkeys. And the turkeys are watching him the whole time. I'm watching them from, they're probably 60 yards or so out, and they're looking at him. And he goes over and crawls to the decoy and starts beating on the decoy with this fan like he's another Tom fighting this gobbler decoy. Those turkeys turned around and came running back in, got to within about 30 yards, and I crushed one.
So did you shoot right over your guide?
No, not. I wasn't that dangerous.
I'm like,
there was about I'd say a 90-degree angle from where he was to where the turkeys were. So I was definitely not even close to where they came in right at us, and then took like a hard left and went away. And he went out through the decoy while they were away, but starting to come back in. That's when I shot them. So just to paint that picture, no, I didn't shoot over his head.
Because the picture I had in my head was your, set up on the decoy.
Right there.
That's how accurate that gun is. I can just shoot right over his shoulder, right? No, I would never take a shot like that. But I was well away from him, but they were coming back in. In fact, that's one of the things that he said. He was like, man, I was just waiting to hear you shoot because they were starting to come in, and I didn't want them to come in too close to me in the decoy. And that, that's the only shot you had. It was a cool hunt, man. And there were, we saw so many birds down there. There was one morning I saw over 20 gobblers, not including the hens and jakes that I saw, over 20 gobblers.
Wow, that seems like a target-rich environment. I could probably miss 15 of them.
And hogs everywhere. I shot a hog down there with the flintlock. I shot another hog with my brother had brought this 300 blackout AR, and he shot a hog with it, and his son shot a hog with it, and we were driving around and trying to find hogs that we could stalk, because that's a blast to go and go spot them and then just go stalk. And I only brought my flintlock on purpose because I knew if I brought my bow, I would wimp out on the flintlock and try to shoot a turkey with a bow. I knew I would do that. So I said, I can't. So I only brought the flintlock, and I wasn't planning on shooting hogs. Well, my brother had killed a couple hogs, and his son had killed a couple hogs, and my dad shot a couple, and I'm like, I'm the only one who hasn't shot a hog yet. So I'm like, well, give me that freaking AR, man. So I went out and shot another hog and got some sausage, and it was delicious.
So
it was a fun hunt.
So with the turkeys, like a flintlock has kind of two puffs, right? Like when the gun goes off, it doesn't just go off. So how did they react to that?
It was, the way the gun went off when I shot was almost instantaneous. It was more of a, as opposed to a crack, boom. There wasn't much of a delay. On a flintlock, for those who don't understand, there's a charge in the barrel that actually propels the bullet. And then outside of the barrel, there's a hole in the barrel, a small pinhole. And outside of that, there's a small, shallow pan that you put other powder in. And there's a flint on the actual cock or the hammer. And that flint comes down and hits a piece of metal called a frizzen, showers sparks down into that pan. The fire goes through that little pinhole and ignites the charge that blows the bullet out. And it takes more explanation than it does to actually fire this thing off, right? But there's ways to load it, and the way this gun was made, the touch hole that the guy put in and the way that I loaded it, the flint that I'm using, the combination that I have, it's a pretty fast ignition. So I know you've probably seen movies and videos where they, that fire goes off and then it's like a second or two later, boom, the gun goes off. But this wasn't as dramatic as that. It was a pretty quick fire. There was a delay, without a doubt. I mean, there's a slight delay, but it went off pretty quickly.
Okay. I mean, hell, I've shot deer with a muzzle loader and like super humid, and it's like pop, like son of a bitch.
Dude, this year, so there was a primitive hunt in Maryland. It was like early February, and it was my dad and my brother Josh came down to hang out with us and hunt with us, and we went out, and Dad had his flintlock, and I had a percussion cap, side lock, but percussion cap, like a Hawken, style muzzleloader, and I put a cap on and fired off 7 times at deer within 20 yards, and only the cap went off 7 times. And I'm like, what the hell? Dad shot a deer with his flintlock, killed it, beautiful shot, heart shot on this doe. And this property that we hunted, my father bought it specifically for sick deer. And my brothers and I were talking. We're like, it's great. Dad needs to be the one to shoot the first deer on this property. He bought it, and he needs to be the first one to shoot. Well, I'm telling you right now, I tried my hardest to kill these chicken deer with my muzzleloader that day, and all I could get was the cap to go off. And I came home and I looked in the nipple on that muzzleloader, and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it. I put a cap on it, and there was a pumpkin sitting out, an old pumpkin from the fall out in my yard, and one cap went off, and boom, that thing just exploded. I'm like, so I don't know if there was some divine intervention there, or if there was some humidity that went on, but they're not exactly the most reliable at all times. There's a reason why people were smart enough to start using cartridges and smokeless powder, right?
Oh, for sure. John, have you ever shot anything with the muzzleloader, or done any hunting with the muzzleloader?
No, I've shot a muzzleloader, but I've never, not a gun hunter. I mean, back when we started, though, I mean, they really didn't even have, my dad had an old kit, Hawkins or whatever it was, and Frank had one too.
Yeah, my dad built one.
But pretty much no one, we didn't do anything. We didn't do any hunting with them.
So we used to go over to the other side of the state with one of my dad's buddies, and he's one of the guys I'm actually going elk hunting with. And it was a big thing, like opening day of muzzleloader. They did drives and all sorts of stuff, and kind of like what Billy was saying, it was like the one day we saw, hundreds of deer, but it was only bucks, and no bucks, all does. I mean, my first day, my first experience, we got there late. And they're like, the drivers are already going, just get up there. And my dad and I went to this big boulder out in this field. And I swear to God, it was like a movie. It was 40 deer came rushing by, some of them from me to you away. And there's no bucks. And then all of a sudden, here comes the drivers, And then there was one deer that got up and went the other way, which was probably a buck, but everybody was just standing around bullshitting, and that deer was like, and now's my time, But
yeah,
just
that
wild.
buck had been there, done that.
But yeah, I think when I started getting out of gun hunting, I would just bring my muzzleloader and a pistol because it was like, well, this is kind of silly and, whatever. Kind of on the same plane, but I haven't gone down, and get the freaking matchlock, that
get a little hiss going. But hey, you can always bring a bow during those seasons. I mean, I think, or I don't know about Michigan, but I know in Virginia and Maryland is for if you want to bring a lesser, quote unquote, lesser range weapon or whatever, you're allowed to. So if it's muzzleloader season, you can hunt with a bow. If it's rifle season, you can hunt with a muzzleloader or a bow.
Yeah.
So You always do that?
Yeah, it's the same. It's pretty much the same rules. You just have to follow the rules of the gun season. So like if you have
Yep.
wear orange, you got to wear orange. If it's antlerless, or no antlerless, then you got to follow the same rules as the gun seasons.
Do you guys think that orange is actually something that, when you're hunting, do you think orange actually deters deer? Do you think it affects the way that deer see you at all?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't. I mean,
I mean, I'm obviously no biologist, but I thought the deer were like colorblind to that. Like they just see it as a gray, basically.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been busted sight-wise while I was, while I wasn't moving.
Right.
yeah, I don't know. And it's funny because I don't think I've ever had to answer that question. I've never really thought about it as being a big deal. I just think about it like
I just don't want to get shot.
Yeah, not getting shot. So it's like I'd rather, and I even feel weird. So for us, there's some seasons that overlap where in the late season and stuff where you don't have to wear orange if you're not hunting with a muzzleloader or this or that. Or when we were in Colorado, it was muzzleloader season and it was bow season, and it was
and that when we did the teach and train, one of the guys that shoots at the club where I was in the clubhouse talking, and he ended up going out to Colorado bow hunting for elk this year or last year, and it was during the muzzleloader, and he's like, I didn't even think about it, but I'm out there walking around, and he's like, my freaking pants and shit were like buckskin, and my Mystery Ranch freaking pack is like buckskin color, so he's like, I'm walking around out there looking like a freaking elk. And he's like, I was sitting down. I found the spot on this wallow, and sat there for like an hour. And finally, he's like, nothing. So I followed the trail up that these elk were on. And he's like, all of a sudden, I heard something back at the wallow, and I looked back, and there's a freaking dude with his muzzle loader pointed right at me.
No.
Yeah, he's I was in his freaking scope, if it's brown, it's down. And he's like, there was two of them, and they were both supposed to be wearing orange, and one guy wasn't wearing orange. But that is the whole thing. But I'm like, well, you might want to wear some orange, or definitely don't wear the fucking buckskin colored shit.
Yeah.
Well, I did that. What was it, 2 years ago? I didn't pay attention to the dates. I'm out doing some preseason scouting. Come to find out, it's the youth and disabled veterans hunt, which is the worst thing because they can shoot whatever. Antlerless. There's no
restrictions. There's nothing.
So it's like, and then they're young kids or whatever. They're supposed to be with adult, obviously, but some of those adults I think are but. I'm walking around out there, and all of a sudden I see someone in a tree stand. I'm like, with a gun, and I'm like, oh shit! I'm wearing buckskin, pants and a camo shirt. I'm like, I'm gonna get freaking shot. So I'm like, I gotta wave at this guy, but I don't want to look like.
Well, that's actually a conversation that I had with Greg from Tethered. So Greg and Jared came and turkey hunted with Taylor and I, 2 weeks ago? And we got them on birds right away. Every day they were on birds. And in fact, Greg shot one 100 yards from a highway. It's urban hunting at its finest, and he's killing turkeys, So it was a blast. But we were talking about it because we went to another property that my buddy Peter, he's a local trapper around me, and I do jiu-jitsu with him. Super freaking cool dude. His name's Peter Dalton. I said, hey, Greg's coming up, and I need to find another turkey spot. He was like, oh, I got you covered. Let's go to one of my favorite spots. So we went up, and it was like an 80-acre property, and Taylor and Peter and I went to one section of the property, and Greg and Jared went to another section of the property. Well, a couple birds started gobbling, and they were kind of sort of in between us. So we all went to the same birds. Well, we got in, and Peter and Taylor and I are sneaking up and trying to get set up on these birds. And Peter says, there's a bird. I'm like, and then we hear a whistle. I'm like, well, okay, birds don't whistle, turkeys don't whistle, right? So we heard another whistle, and we're like, okay, that's got to be those guys. Then we saw them move. And it reminds me of the time that I was talking to my dad. I was hunting with my dad. We were turkey hunting, and we were going after this gobbler, and it was on private land, and we were the only ones who had permission on it. And I was a kid, and we're going after this gobbler, and we get down, and we get close enough to where we're going to set up, and I see this turkey's wing like a flapping, you know? And I'm like, Dad, there's a turkey. And he said, no, that's a hunter. It was a guy. His hand was gloved, but his fingers were spread. So it almost looked like the end of a turkey wing. I mean, I was a kid, you know, but your mind screws you up, you know?
Right.
And he was waving his hand at us while turkey hunting. So I'll never forget my dad teaching me that lesson right then and there. He didn't give a shit if that guy we're screwing up the gobbler or not. He told me right then and there. He said, that's exactly why if someone comes up on you hunting and they haven't seen you, you don't move. You make a noise. You say something. You whistle at them. You talk to them. Make sure they understand, hey, there's a human being over here before you move. Right. And it was the very same thing that Greg and Jared did. They whistled to us. They were like, hey, guys, we're over here, you know, before they got up and just started moving. Because, I mean, if you walk up on a realistic Avian X gobbler decoy, you know, and, you know, they look just like a freaking turkey. You know, if one's gobbling right there and you get up on it and all of a sudden you come around a tree, there's this gobbler sitting there, you know,
right, and
someone just moves, you know, it's a lot more dangerous. So, you know, public safety announcement, yell out, screw the gobbler that you're trying to work, you know, just safety is more important. So make sure you yell out or something as opposed to just moving first. Waving is a scary thing because I witnessed it firsthand. I thought it was a wing. I thought it was a turkey wing.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree that we've all shot a decoy once or twice, right?
All of us? All of us?
Well, how about, I think one of us.
Hey, I've shot duck decoys before, but I've shot duck decoys before. Yeah.
I've almost done it on purpose, just like at the end of the hunt, just pissed off, like put one through the decoy.
But John, I have done that before. Sometimes on these damage permits, we'll hunt in the springtime, and we'll use fawn decoys. And you'll put a fawn decoy, and this is no joke. We'll put fawn decoys out in the spring, and we'll try to bring in, like, you know, you have deer that are expecting, and if it was from strictly a culling standpoint, yeah, that's a different story. I don't personally like to do that. I'll try to, if a yearling comes in who's not expecting, oh yeah, it's game over. That's a lot of times what I'm targeting in the springtime.
Right.
But they'll come into these fawn decoys, and they're definitely. I've got a fawn decoy right now. I'll take a picture of it and send it to you. It's got a perfect X right through the heart because it was sitting there at 15 yards and I didn't see anything, and I just said, well, I want to practice on it, and I zapped its ass. It wasn't a long blood trail.
So where are you guys at right now for deer hunting out there? Is it still on?
Yeah, it actually just ended for the urban season not yesterday, but the Saturday or Sunday before. And right now the damage permits or the kill permits are starting. I'm not assigned to any personally right now, but Taylor and I are actually meeting a brand new client here this week. We're supposed to do it tomorrow, but he can't do it, time frame wise. So sometime this week, we're going to get signed up on a brand new property on kill permits, and then we're going to start hunting. I'm going to finish out the turkey season I may deer hunt 1 or 2 times before, the turkey season ends here in a week or two. But I took off the full month of April of deer hunting in order to just focus on turkeys. But yeah, we're gonna get right back into it as soon as the KPs start up again.
That
And
sounds so weird. I took
I
I took
know,
some
I
deer
know
hunting
it
off
is.
for April. Like, what?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a whole different ball game. You don't go out. I don't even get into a tree until I don't like in June. I won't even get into the tree until 7 o'clock, like 7 p.m. That's when I get in the tree
Right.
to hunt. But the big issue with it is you shoot a deer. If you've got a track for more than, you know, 20 minutes, you're getting home at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night.
Right.
And 5 a.m., 6 a.m., when I've got to be at work, that comes pretty early. And there's only one or two butcher shops who take deer during this time of year for Hunters for the Hungry. And there isn't one of them that's open at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So during that time, I've got people on call that take deer, like either folks who like supply to needy families. I've got a couple dudes who we'll give them deer, and it's a process already. They call a couple different families. Those families come over, and that deer is gone within an hour or two, and they're taking it home, and it's in refrigerators and freezers, and so they take care of it pretty quick. Otherwise, if it's too late or I don't get that kind of connection, I've got a butchering system at my house that at his house too. We go and we skin them, we put them on ice and coolers, and then that's the big thing is once we get them skinned and quartered, then I put mine on ice and I open up the drain on the cooler and just let it drain. And I can leave it in there for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 days as long as I just keep adding fresh ice and let the water drain out. So it never sits in water. It just sits on ice. Man, it's like aging a deer. It's like a wet aging, as opposed to dry aging,
Yeah.
but no bacteria grows on it or anything because it stays, 32 degrees. And really, it takes a lot of the blood out, and it does take some flavor out of the deer, out of the meat. But on the other hand, it's extremely tender. We just ate tonight. We just ate a front shoulder and the football roast, like that. I don't know. I think it's called like the sirloin. But I did those, and those had been on ice for like 7 or 8 days without. I just left them in the cooler, let the water just drain out, and for 7 or 8 days, yeah, they just and then took them out, vacuum sealed them, and then threw them in the sous vide, ready to go. That's a good way to do it. But I mean, right now, I'm at the point where I'll gut a deer in 2 or 3 minutes. It's completely field dressed, and then I'll get from once I hang the deer to it being quartered in on a in a cooler or in a fridge. Oh man, 25, 30 minutes from fur on it to I'm going to bed and washing up. It's probably 30 minutes.
Cool deal.
That's, it just reminds me of like Warren Womack talking to him, and, he's like, yeah, and there's a couple, he's got it all timed down to, 8 minutes or so. And that was one of the interesting things that, talking to Taylor, 'cause Warren was like approaching 400 deer killed, and he's got all the stories and, all the documentation, and Taylor's like, yeah, I don't keep track. It's more than that though. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a couple. There's another dude who I know, and he's another dude. Look, we're in DC, so you think about all the people who work for the government around us, but there's another guy who works in DC. I'll just say that, and he defense type of dude, right? He's killed well over 1,000 deer. 100%, 1,000 deer. I mean, without a doubt. Now, he is, how do I say this? He is not exactly, he doesn't have any discretion. If a deer walks in, if it's brown, I don't care what it is. He's shooting, and he's a hell of a shot, man. His recovery rate is like 99.8%, like stupid, ridiculous, But I mean, that's what you get when you shoot that many deer,
Right.
You learn so much. I was talking to my dad one time years ago about just what I've learned from shooting a lot of deer, and it's more you learn about the body positioning and how and when and where to shoot them that most people don't get. You have to make mistakes to be able to learn from them, right? You have to be able to pretty much. I mean, every deer I shoot, I give it, when field dressing it, I give it an autopsy, and then I come back and I think back about what the situation was and why certain things happened. And I've seen some things. I've seen arrows go through deer in certain ways that no one would ever believe, but I know it happened that way because I witnessed it. I was the one shooting, and like, there was a deer that I shot. My dad was hunting this one area, and this big doe kept busting him, and he was getting frustrated, and he got pissed, and he said, "Go in there and kill that doe." So I went in there, and she came in, and she was at 40 yards, and she knew exactly where it was. I mean, I don't know. I think she was seeing us. There was a certain time from our vehicles to where we were getting to the hunting that the vegetation was a little thin. I think she was bedding in an area that she could see us. So she'd circle around to where she knew we were the only place we could hunt. And she would go pinpoint us, right? Well, she got in and she was just on the edge. She was at 40 yards. And I shot, and my arrow hit her, and I knew I smoked her. She ran, took off, and died right away. Well, when I went over and recovered her, my arrow had entered like almost in the brisket. It was super low, like a low heart shot brisket, but it came out and it actually hit her shoulder blade on the opposite side, high, almost like I shot her from under her. But she had dropped and was springing away and like jumping away from me, almost parallel to the ground when the arrow hit her. And it's just crazy things like that I've seen and that Taylor's seen that we've done because of so many arrows that have been through deer, with us that it's sometimes it's hard for people to really believe, like, oh, that didn't happen. Like, actually, crazy as it sounds, it did,
Look, Frank's son, Chris, it's funny because he's all the deer that he's killed, I've been with him or like on the same hunts, so we took him up to our property in the UP, and this is one of his like proudest moments. He went out and he found the spot and set up, and the deer came in just like he wanted to, and it was just this little doe, and he shot it, and the deer, he's like, I shot this deer like right behind the front shoulder. It ran 30 yards dead into a tree, like squared up this tree, this big old crash, and then it's laying right there dead. He's like, I'm so ecstatic that happened,
Mm-hmm.
And so we get the 4-wheeler and we go down there and we're like, okay, let's check this out. And we're like, you probably shot it in the ass or something. And he's like, no, I smoked it. it was perfect shot. Well, we go up there, we get this deer in the headlights. We flip the deer over, and I was looking at John's arrows behind me because it was one of these cheap Carbon Express, like the old with the green and white, like 4-inch fletchings.
The ones from like Walmart.
Yeah. And it's got green fletching sticking out of its ass. It's out of its hind quarter. And he's like, and the arrow's buried in there, and he's like, I didn't shoot it there. I don't know what happened, like, And then we looked behind the front shoulder. Well, what had happened was he shot through the deer, and it stuck the arrow in the ground. And when the deer turned and flipped over, it busted the arrow and fell on it and stuck it in its ass.
Jeez.
But it was just so funny because we're like, oh, yeah, sure. And then we flipped it over, and there was the fletching sticking right out of it. And so, but when we cleaned it up, there was, 3 blades right behind the front shoulder, passed through the whole works, but that's where that half of the arrow ended up.
Yeah, but you never, ever, ever, ever admit to him that you saw those 3 blades behind the shoulder.
Oh, but he was just beside himself.
There was the very first time that I went to Africa was in South Africa, and we were on our way to go hunt for whatever, because it's a target-rich environment. Well, there's this little itty-bitty antelope called a steenbok, and it's the size of like a giant jackrabbit or something. I mean, they're itty-bitty, teeny tiny. And we saw one as we were driving. They were like, hey, let's jump out. Let's see if we can go shoot this thing. So I went out and took a shot. And before my arrow even got there, this thing was running away. So I'm like, well, great. I went over, got my arrow, and took it back and went hunting. A couple days later, we were generally in the same area, and we saw another one. And the PH is like, all right, let's go shoot this one. So I get over, put a little stalk on, and the thing's watching me the whole time. And I drew and I shot. And again, same thing happened. As I shot, the thing must have heard it. And as soon as it heard that arrow, it took off. And it jumped, and it kind of turned and jumped. And as it jumped into the arrow. And the arrow hit it and spined it. I'm like, oh my God, holy shit, I can't believe that happened. So we went over to it, and it spined it, so it's still alive, and I put it out of its misery, and we looked down at it, and its ear had a perfect X in its ear. And I'm like, look at this. And then I realized that was the perfect size of my Slick Trick Mag broadhead. And then I looked at him like, well, this blood's dry. It had been from when I shot the day or two before. It had perfectly pierced its ear and put an X in its ear. And that deer, it's not a deer, it's an antelope. But that antelope, I've got a full body mount, and you can actually see on the mount, you can see where the X is on its ear.
That's super cool.
Yeah. I mean, and this is a wild animal there's no fence or anything. It's not like it had its territory and wouldn't leave. And a little side note, back to falconry, there is a chick, her name's Lauren McGow, and she lived in Mongolia with the nomads and learned how to hunt with golden eagles there for coyotes and wolves and different hares and shit like that. And she's known as the Eagle Falconer. Like, she was on 60 Minutes and all this shit. She actually goes to South Africa with an African crowned eagle and hunts for those same little antelope, the steenbok, with an eagle.
So how do you get on that?
I don't know, but I really want to. I really want to. Well, look, we've got Sika deer in Maryland, and if I just had unlimited resources and I had the opportunity to be an eagle falconer, I would definitely get a big female golden eagle, and I would hunt Sika deer with it, without a doubt. I think that would just be badass.
Well, when you get your master license, there you go.
Yeah, I don't know, man. The thing is, man, if you're an eagle falconer, that's your life. That's your entire life. Like, I would never be able to bow hunt again. It's just, it's that time consuming. It's that much. You spend your life doing that. If you are a golden eagle falconer, that's what you are. That's what you identify as. I mean, imagine if, John, like, for example, like your fishing trip, by the way, it was epic down in Florida. I was super jelly. But imagine if like the only way that you could actually do that would be you had to move to Florida and you had to live there, and that's the only thing you could do. You never bow hunted again. Like, hey, fishing's great, but I don't want to give up the rest of the things that I do in my life just for one thing. I think that's kind of where I was going earlier with, we talked about, trad bow versus, gun hunting and the time you have to spend to make sure that you are efficient with it. Like, sure, I could become a master falconer and eventually, get permission to get a golden eagle. But if I didn't have the time and to put into it, it would be a waste of time, and I wouldn't hunt it, and I wouldn't be successful with it. Just like, someone who never, ever, ever will pick up their stalker stick bow that they bought, for, really good money, excellent bow, but they never, ever shoot it. They're never going to be effective in the woods. So you just have to be realistic with, what your choice is and how you hunt, and, and that goes with falconry or gun hunting or bow hunting or fishing. It doesn't matter what it is. And, if you love fishing, don't expect to go out for, trolling, on the lakes for salmon or rockfish around here. If you're just going to be a, 2 time a year fisherman, go get a guide for that kind of shit,
Right.
Yeah. It's funny because John's over here going like, he's already looking at boats for Florida. And
it's a hard thing to do, man. You have to make sacrifices sometimes. You have to kind of pick and choose what you're going to do. Because look, it's YOLO, right, bro?
Yeah.
It's YOLO. You only live once, and I'm not really saying that because, hey, screw it, do whatever you want. I'm more like, you only have one life. You only have a certain amount of time. We've got families, we've got people, we've got our friends, we've got our passions, we've got our activities and our hobbies and things. I'm at the point in my life where I'm maxed out on the different activities that I do. Like if someone came out to me and they were like, hey, we've got this different activity, different hobby. I don't know if let's just say catching deer with a lasso or something like that. And I don't know, like, let's lasso some deer, and it would really appeal to me. Like I'd have to give something up at this point to be able to do that.
so that's a perfect transition though, because I was going to ask like, what is the catalyst for doing the podcast? And like, because you guys, it seems like have like a legit production, like,
Yeah.
And so that's got, John and I know, like it takes time. It's, it is a commitment. It's all that thing. So how did that come about? And like, what's the cadence that you guys are doing that at, and et cetera?
It's natural, man. And really we've been hounded by people saying, why don't you have a podcast? Because like when we hang out with people, they're like, oh, we should be recording this right now. I'm like, well, and then Taylor and I talk like that. We hang out and we talk all the time. So we just got to the point where we're like, why don't we just record this? Because these are the things we talk about on literally a daily basis. And it's funny because I'll call him and I'll tell him something. He's like, oh, don't tell me. Don't tell me. Let's just record tomorrow, and then we'll go and record. So we do that now. We're more talking, on camera and on mic as opposed to off. And what's really crazy is that we probably have, I'd say, as many episodes that we will never release that, we'll never make the air because there are certain things that are said that we shouldn't say in public. And look, we're not crazy. We're not like, breaking the law types of dudes or anything like that. But it's just certain things where, this last podcast that we talked about, we're pushing the edge because, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about when I say you know information about the industry that you don't want to hurt people in their livelihood. You know what I mean? And
Right.
and there's certain things that and then there's also stuff that we get pretty deep on things, and sometimes we're just like, yeah, maybe and there's other times where other people hear it and they're like, all right, no, we're not gonna post that. Like statute of limitations, you still have 2 or 3 years on that, guys. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to get arrested here.
You can't
We're not
talk about that
shit. No, but I mean, really, it's organic to the point that we literally just record. It's just the same thing you guys and I are talking about right now. It's the same way that we chat and we BS every time we talk, every time we've seen each other. It's just that natural flow of conversation, and that's how it started, and that's kind of what it's. Hopefully, it stays. It's hard sometimes. You guys have heard podcasts where it's forced, right? You guys have a natural way of you talk to each other, and you could tell you guys talk all the time. You're buddies, and when Ernie and Frank are on, you all know each other, so it's easy. But then you hear some other podcasts, and not necessarily hunting podcasts, but other podcasts where, I mean, it's more like these people are like sitting down, like, oh, hold on, time out. That wasn't one of my talking points. We can't talk about that right now. And I don't like listening to that kind of stuff. I like to hear people talk. I like to just be part of the conversation. And the reason why is because when I was a little kid, my favorite thing in the world was when my dad had his buddies and they came over to the house, or when I was in hunting camp and I was allowed to sit and listen to their stories. And it was almost like I could hear them. I could hear them tell each other their stories. I mean, I wasn't even there. They weren't telling them really for me, but every now and then my dad would tell his buddy, hey, we got ears here, meaning me. Not that I have big ears, but I'm hearing everything they're saying,
Right.
Hey, we got ears here. So they, I wouldn't say censor it, but it would be good enough for me to still hear and enjoy the story and the conversation. And man, I loved those moments. And that's what drew me to hunting camps and things like that. It's the same exact reason why I listen to podcasts, why I listen to you guys, because I like to hear what you guys are saying. I want to hear those stories and the camaraderie. It's not even just about the stories. It's not even really even about always the information for me personally. It's just, I like the conversation. I like to hear that. I like to be a part of it. I like to hear it.
But I think like for you guys, like, I don't know. I hope that the guests have gotten it like from this podcast, but like I love listening to you talk because, like I said, like you're just like it's just so freaking interesting to me. Like how the hell do you go from birds to freaking flintlocks to your whole family shoots traditional shit and like all this
Jiu-jitsu.
stuff? Yeah, yeah.
Man, I really do. Seriously, man, I'm humbled by it. I appreciate that. Because I don't think I'm that. I really don't think I'm that interesting. I just do my shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
I just do what I do.
We're going to see Billy on the next commercial, the most interesting man.
Man, you got to have a face for that. I've got a face for podcasts and radio.
But like seriously, like Taylor's funny, and he's got like both of you have like no shame, and so to watch you guys on the podcast. Like I'm like, oh, these guys are cool. Like I'm so happy that they did this, and I'm like, oh, it's probably stuff that I've already heard, or like whatever. And then like even hearing like some of the stories, I'm just like in the way that you guys interact, like just knowing like Taylor being so goofy and occasionally like effeminate, like I'm like just like like just watching it, I'm like, oh my god, these two, like it's awesome. So if anybody hasn't like listened to it or checked it out on YouTube, and watching it on YouTube is a completely different experience, because you get to see, like, so when Taylor is like in the tethered tree stand little videos that they did, and he's like dressed up in like all these different outfits and whatnot. Just take away the outfits, and that's who's sitting down there. He's doing the same facial expressions and goofy voices and like rolling his eyes and stuff, and it's just hilarious to watch, and to watch you feed off of it. It's hilarious.
Yeah, there's it is absolutely natural. There's nothing we don't like, I don't know. There's no production, or there's no prep or anything. There are times we definitely kind of talk about, hey, what are we going to talk about today? Or we will make notes, and we do research what we're going to talk about. But when it comes to like any type of joking around or BSing, that's just how we act, you know. And Taylor really is, he's a fun dude. He's a real smart guy, and you know, he's shameless. He really is. He's absolutely shameless. But not to the point where he's like sellout or anything like that. And that's what I respect about him. He's not, you know, he believes in what he, you know, what he represents. But you know, on the other side of it, man, he's not that serious. Like we're not like serious dudes. We're just regular dudes. We just want to go out there and hunt and have fun and BS. And you know, if we get some cool experiences out of this, out of podcasting, out of just making videos and shit like that, man, that's what we want to do. We just want to have fun. It's the whole reason I ever went to ATA. In the very first time that I went, like 6 or 8 years ago, I was like, this is going to be cool. Let's go have fun. And we're going to tear some shit up. Like that's how we roll, man.
Well, and it sounds like it's just like the same thing like with John and I. Is like we would just sit and have these conversations, and we were listening to a lot of podcasts, and we're like, let's just start recording this. Like we can do this, you know.
Exactly.
And Adam's much better at it than, like, he's probably thinking, God, I wish I had a partner like Billy. 'Cause, you know, Taylor and Billy, they feed off each other. And I'm just sitting over here most of the time, just like, I'm listening, listen to Adam do the interviews, and like, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, you've got to have, you know, but you guys have a different, you have a different, you know, type of podcast that, you know, because, and then you also have a dynamic where, you know, it's like two really different people. Like John and Adam, you guys are both totally different people. Like, you know, and when it comes to like the technical pieces that John comes in, it's like, you know, like, no offense, Adam, but I mean, he's going to smoke you when it comes to when it comes to anything technical, when it comes to archery and things like that. And if, you know, if you didn't have that, and like if I didn't have someone, you know, friends of mine and things like that who could help me technically in archery, I'd be a complete failure. And it sounds like from your side too. I mean, John he's building your bowstrings. He's literally like, hey, you know what? Your bow sucks right now. Let me make sure it's perfect. You know, you have to have that. But that also is very evident in your podcast and how you guys work together. It's like, it's not just the archery technical portions. There's other portions that John thinks a different way than you do, and adds a different perspective to the podcast that I really don't think it would work out if you guys, if it was just one of you, it wouldn't be as good as the sum of the two.
Well, and that's what I keep telling John, because he's like, you do all the stuff. And I'm like, I can't do this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I can do all the talking. Yeah. And I can, you know, I can do all of that. But like when it comes down to any of that other stuff, or like, you know, as John's thinking and like, just like taking it all in, like when he does have a question, then it's like something, profound or,
Yep.
something that like really needs to be asked, from.
There's a different, that perspective. He's got a different brain. His brain works differently than yours, and yours works differently than him. You guys have two different perspectives that complement each other very, very well. And, like I said, it's the sum of the two that's more, it's bigger than just you two individually. And I think that's a lot of, duos or trios or whatever. I mean, you guys have a quintuplet with Ernie and Franco when you come in. I mean, I tell you, I cannot wait till next year. I hope this shit's opened up and we get to hang out next year. I really, really do.
Oh,
That'll
yeah.
be a fun time. All of you guys with us. I mean, because look, it's the more people. It's like hunting camp. Hunting camp by yourself is one of those grinds, and it's like a spiritual experience. It's a it's a personal. I don't know. It's a satisfaction you get for yourself when you leave. If it's with one other person, it's more of a bond between two guys, and it's great. We love that. When you have more than two people, it turns into hunting camp, and then it's a team effort, and it's a big deal, and the more people you add to it, to a certain point, it can get bad, but the more people you add to it, it kind of it enhances everything. And I just think we have a good community with with you guys and us and the folks that we hang out with and talk to in the hunting community. I think we've kind of surrounded ourselves with some pretty cool people, and we've not really exposed ourselves to some of the other people that we don't want to be exposed to with purpose.
Well, and I think that's the point of the whole thing, and I think that's why I appreciate what you guys are doing, because I know like where it's coming from, and I think that translates as well. And it's like, it isn't a look at me type thing. It's just like, we're going to have fun. We're going to do this. We do have access to a lot of cool people and a lot of cool stuff, and we want to share that because, either people have told you that you need to do that, or you feel like, this needs to be heard. And I think what's really cool for you guys is for, like I say this, with Frank, and I just love having it on there, is like having this stuff, these hunting camps, this digital hunting camp, all of this stuff, but having it documented forever, like just for a legacy piece, for, in 30 years, your kids can go back and listen to,
might not want them
to, remember when Dad shit his pants at Disney?
I haven't, well, look, we're the first generation to record this stuff in this way. Right. Previous generations have done it all in print, and that's archived forever and ever and ever, mostly. Some of it's been lost, and it can be lost digitally too, but we're the first generation to have this. So our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, if they even give a shit at that point, right, or even other people, can actually listen back to, these are who these people were. How often have you sent an email or a text message and someone takes it the wrong way because your tone didn't convey through text?
Yeah, oh, yeah. John texts everything with 5 exclamation points. So, like, I had to have a conversation with him. I'm like, are you really excited every single time you text me? Or, like, what is the deal? Yeah. Are you yelling at me? Like, what? I never know. Like, but every single text has, like, exclamation points. I'm like.
It's usually when I'm working on something and it's like, this fucking piece of shit. Why did he buy this? Or we were just talking. He brought that up just the other day. He's like, "Are you always excited, or do you just do the voice to text? Like, is that why it's always like that?" I'm like, "No, I had that shit in there."
When John uses voice to text, it's in bold, italics, and exclamation points at the end.
Yeah. Then I send a picture like Kramer of me pulling my hair out.
That reminds me of the very first email I sent. And the response back was, if you put everything in all caps, it sounds like it looks like you're screaming at me. I put it in all caps thinking, oh, this looks cooler than just normal typing. And they're like, that means you're screaming at me? Oh, okay. First email I ever sent was an automatic failure on the internet.
Yeah, I have to tone it down a little bit. Be like, okay, yeah, he's not quite as upset as I thought he was.
Well, I just always get like, John's usually like K or this, and then everything's like exclamation points. And then he throws in like a meme every once in a while, and I'm like, he's really not that much older than me. He gets it.
I love those things. Ever since you showed them, I'm sending it to my kids all the time. And they're like, what the hell?
You're like, Dad, that's inappropriate. You're like, that didn't have anything sexual to do with it. And they're like, no, that literally made no sense. That's why it was inappropriate, Dad.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, I get that too. Yeah, I know my kids are growing, and I've got a 15-year-old. I've got 4 daughters, 15 all the way down to 3, and my 3-year-old is she's going to be a challenge. You may maybe in 10 years we'll do another podcast and it'll be, so how's prison? Oh my God, it's great. I can't hunt here at all, but I'm doing a lot of working out.
I've made a mint sending these pigeons from one prison to the next. They're a lot easier to train than falcons.
Yeah, that's good. She's challenging, testing my patience.
Yeah. I'm at the point with my son. My son's the youngest, and he's going to be 18 this October. So,
man, John, you are old.
Yeah. Well, I got 4 kids. I got 3 girls. Then my oldest daughter, she'll be 28 this fall. So,
jeez,
I started when I was young, but yeah, dealing with the kids, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, we'll see how they. We'll see how they look at these podcasts and future generations, or when they get a little older, when they want to look back and see how we were. And I hope it's at least in a humorous light, if nothing else, because it's going to be hard to respect me, for God's sake. Jesus, all the shit that I've done.
So I think about where I actually have the old. I think they were the 6 or 8 millimeter films, but there was no sound on those,
Yep.
And so my dad used to race motorcycles and snowmobiles and all that stuff way back before I was, born. And my cousin actually found all these old video or, the actual spools of film in my grandparents' home. She went and now she put them on DVD, which is pretty much obsolete,
Oh yeah, for real.
But sitting there,
now you need to convert that.
Exactly. Now you got to put that on a freaking SD drive or a stick. But it's like looking at that, you could actually see how they were interacted, but there was no sound to it. So it's like it's awesome being able to see it other than just a still picture. But so now with all the the technology we have now, I mean with the videos and our podcast and our YouTube, they can actually see how Adam missed the turkey and shot the decoy, or how
these aren't just stories; they're real.
Hey, let's watch that video once. But
yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool because, like you said, you can tell the story, and then if someone says, "Oh, you guess what? Here's the video," and they can actually watch the video or hear the story. It just adds a little extra, because those old 8 millimeter or whatever they were videos, my mother was talking about. In fact, she's gotten some of hers converted, and she said, "Hey, watch these." And it's the same thing. There's no sound whatsoever, but you've got people back then talking to the camera, and you're like, I wish I could hear
Right.
I wish I could. But it's funny, you can see these people moving and, interacting with their family members and things like that. And they're no longer around,
Right.
especially the folks who are, no longer with us. And, it's cool to be able to see them, and you wish you had more. Now, like you said, with technology being what it is, we can hear these people and that we miss. We can see them, and maybe we hear and see them the same way every time we replay it over and over and over again, but at least we still get to do it.
Right. Especially like you get into the older generation, like the grandparents and great grandparents. I remember, my grandpa passed away when I was like 8, and I vaguely remember him, but like I see him in these videos, but you can't hear him talk or anything. But so that's what it's going to be great for even younger generations, down the line that possibly didn't even get to meet us. So.
Yeah, at least maybe we can give them a laugh. Maybe we can give them
wow,
something.
He was pretty funny.
or it could be, oh, geez, I was related to that guy.
Exactly.
But can you delete YouTube because this guy's got 1,000 videos on there? It's like that Jake Paul or something. Man, could you imagine being one of his like great grandkids and you're like, that was my great granddad? God, jeez. Man, that guy? Like, yeah, my great grandma was Cardi B. Oh my God, come on, bro. I'd be upset at that. I'd try to delete some videos. I would not be proud of that.
Right.
Well, I think that's the only thing we can do, though, is like, try our, I mean, it's again to the accountability of like, the podcast that you're not putting out, I mean, that's,
sure.
That's having that sort of responsibility. So like, has your 15-year-old like found your YouTube and like, what does she think of your podcast?
Oh yeah, they all listen to it. My youngest, my 3-year-old doesn't, but the other ones all do. My wife does, and she's, believe me, man, when it airs, she's rolling her eyes, going, "Are you serious? Like, did you have to say that?" I'm getting that kind of reaction, or, you think you're funny. I'm like, I'm not trying to be funny, just trying to tell the truth. Just tell it how it is. You guys, and then she rolls her eyes. But I mean, they do listen to it. And there was one day that they were going. My wife was taking my one daughter to school, and she called me and she was like, "Oh, I just heard you say, talk XYZ," and I could hear it playing in the background. And we said something maybe mildly inappropriate, and she hit the pause. She was like, "I'm listening to this with your daughter. You're not supposed to say that." I'm like, hey, I didn't give like parental guidance here. I mean, it's not like I'm like, this is wide open, man. This is just what we say. But no, we're almost sort of PC a little bit. I mean, we don't like curse and talk about crazy stuff or anything like that. But there's innuendos at least.
Lots of 20 waffles.
Yeah, there's some 20 waffles going on. In fact, my youngest, my 3-year-old, she does know that that's a bad word. She knows, but she cusses better than any of them. That's like I'm almost disappointed in myself for that one, because when she gets around me, when no one else is around, because we'll go on. I've got a Polaris side by side, and she likes to take rides with me, so. In the evening after dinner or something, and right before dark, we'll go look for deer, and we'll hop in the side by side and we'll take a ride. And I'll be damned if we don't start going through the gate and she's like dropping bombs, And I'm like, honey, you can't say that. And she looks at me like, I know I can around you. But then when she gets around mom, gets around her sisters, anyone else, man, she won't say a cuss word. I mean, you can't get her to. But as soon as we get on that Polaris, man, she'll drop a bomb like you wouldn't believe.
It's a safe zone.
It is. Well, it all started. That's my fault, 100%. Because I had a Toyota Tacoma, and her name was Juanita, and she was a sweet old bird. She had a zillion miles on her. And my 2 oldest daughters, when they were really, really little, we used to go ride back roads looking for deer. And the rule was you're allowed to say anything you want when we're driving around in Juanita. In Juanita, it's a cuss-free zone. You can cuss as much as you want. And my two oldest daughters, learned how to cuss driving around Juanita, and they were little. But they would say, they tried it out like, hey, Dad, look at that shit-ass bitch tree right there. It's like, that's a bitch-ass shit. Or, just terrible. Like, and so I said, that's not how you. So I taught them how to cuss in that truck. And yeah, that was the my mother. Oh, she was just kind of disappointed in me. Like, how could you teach your daughters how to cuss? They called it the cussing truck, and I still wish I had it. But I think cussing personally is a skill that you have to learn, and you have to learn not only how to be effective at cussing, but you need to know exactly when to do it. Because if you're just cussing all the time, F-bombs here and there, everywhere, it does nothing. But if you can use cussing to emphasize something really, really important in your life, well, then you used it appropriately.
So I'm just picturing like a scenario in my head where I know you said you and your wife have real good communication or whatever, but like I just picture like her car's in the shop or whatever, and so she's like, "All right, kids, hop in Juanita. We gotta go to school." And then your daughters are just like, "Fuck school!" Like,
come on, Mom, hit that motherfucker. Let's go. What? Yeah, no, we've communicated enough that she does also know that, or back then at least, Juanita was the cuss car, because I'd come home and brag about it. Come on now. I'd come home and then my kids would get all sheepish and like, Dad, you weren't supposed to tell them. I'd look at them and say, hey, I didn't say that I wasn't going to tell. I just said when you got in the car and you cussed, you wouldn't get in trouble. You're not kidding. Man, when I was a kid, if I would have said damn in front of my parents, there would have been a problem. That would have been a major, major problem. And my kids nowadays, now, what's funny is that they don't cuss. They don't, they know how to, but they don't. It would be rare. It's very rare if I ever hear my kids cuss for any reason whatsoever. And I guarantee if my kids cuss, it's appropriate. I guarantee it. They've been skilled. But the youngest, man, she's going to be a problem, I think.
So that's like similar. I mean, you've heard me talk, and my daughter, she's 5, and she doesn't say any bad words, and she like points it out to people, like you can't say that, whatever, but not. Yep. I mean, it's just like regular vernacular. But when she was, I don't know, I guess she's still learning, but like, she was learning to speak 18 months, whatever. And they're like, you're going to teach her those words, it's going to be that. And we were merging on the highway and my wife was driving and she said a couple choice words. And from the from the car seat, my daughter goes, other yucker.
Yep.
And I'm like, it wasn't me. It was not me. So it's like, you. See, she knows that I say those things, but when you say it, I'm like, Mom, do you say other yucker?
Yeah. Mom, I didn't know you also had that kind of a mouth too.
So, oh man, yeah, what a wild time to live in. I'm really happy that you guys are doing the podcast though, and people, please go check it out. These guys are interesting and funny. It's not just a comedy podcast or whatever. I mean, and they kill probably more deer than John and I have ever even shot at.
I've seen.
I was thinking that too.
There's a lot of deer around us, but no, I appreciate it. And if you guys listening, hey, if you don't like it, let us know also. I want to hear that too, because I'll BS with you right back, and I won't take any hard feelings. I kind of like that too. So. No, but like you guys, man, I really appreciate you having me back on the podcast again. I had a blast, like always. I really wish I was sitting right next. I felt like I was, but I wish I was sitting with you guys right now, and we were about to go hit the bar or something like that and have some fun.
Awesome. So where can everybody follow along with the podcast? And I guess if you were going to recommend one of your episodes, if you were going to say this is where you're going to get hooked, which episode would you point them towards?
Oh, geez, man. Which one was the Disney episode? That's a killer right there. I mean, there's a bunch of them. I mean, like you've got the Disney episode, you've got even the episode of the cop pulling the AR on me and stalking us down in the woods next to that house. That's another good one. But there's a bunch of them out there, and there's it depends. Do you want to hear about gear? Do you want to hear about making sure you recover every deer you shoot? Do you want to hear about just BS stories? Well, I mean, there's plenty of episodes out there for you, but it's the Hang and Hunt podcast. Obviously on any podcast platform that you guys listen to. I do recommend, like Adam said, check it out on YouTube. Just Hunt Urban. If you search Hunt Urban on YouTube, you'll see all of our episodes and a bunch of other videos that we have, that have to do with archery and bow hunting. So Hunt Urban on YouTube. It's hunt.urban. I'm sorry. Let me back that up. It's hangandhunt.co on Instagram is the Instagram handle. My personal Instagram handle is William_Phillips. And I mean, that's how you find us. If you guys want to check us out, yeah. I mean, and like I said, any of the podcast platforms, but I'd recommend YouTube. That's usually how I listen to a lot of the podcasts that I listen to, especially if they've got video on them, because then you can see facial expressions, and that matters to me sometimes.
Well, like I said, the most interesting man in the world, Billy Phillips. Thank you so much for being on here. But yeah, I think that's about it.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoys some of the stuff I get into, and I hope I'm as interesting as Adam says I am. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem.